All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today we have another very interesting stream. Major shout out to Tara for sponsoring another stream. If you guys remember last week, was it last week? I'm losing track of time. Tara and her son sponsored the Baal and Moloch, the History of Human Sacrifice stream. Well, today I'm actually really excited for this topic. This is going to be more of a historical deep dive because we're going to be analyzing the important saint. And I'm going to make the case. You could argue, I genuinely think you can make the case this is one of the, if not the greatest Christian warrior king in history. And I would argue because he's the voivode of Moldavia, that it's a smaller territory. It's kind of overlooked in history. And doing today's research reminded me of two previous streams I've done. One was a deep dive on Alfred the Great and the Anglo-Saxons. The other one was St. Constantine the Great. And St. Constantine, upon doing deeper research for today, St. Stephen the Great, voivode of Moldavia, often referred to as not only the Great, but the Holy, is one of the greatest warrior saints. And he, in fact, chose Constantine as a sort of archetype for who he wanted to be and who he wanted to become. And so today we're going to be diving into the incredible reign of St. Stephen the Great, which lasted 47 years. And I found an incredible video. So the way that today's stream is going to be structured is I have a little bit of an introduction. In fact, I want to draw some parallels that I put together between King David and St. Stephen the Great. I also want to give a little bit of a background and information. I put together a study guide that kind of introduces, again, much of this information is going to be repeated as I have about an hour-long video covering the reign of St. Stephen the Great and all his military conquests, because that's one of the things that is so central to today's topic, is how successful he was in battle. And unlike, and even a familiar name that's going to appear in today is Vlad Tepes, Vlad Dracula, Vlad the Impaler. He's actually the cousin of St. Stephen the Great. And even though there's a bit of a going back and forth between the two, at one point they are brothers in arms in battle. Then all of a sudden there's a bit of a question regarding Wallachia and Vlad's attempt to take one of the ports of Moldavia. And eventually, Vlad then is imprisoned over in Hungary. They kind of have a falling out, but it's then St. Stephen later that actually convinces the king of Hungary to release Vlad and help him retake Wallachia. And unfortunately for Vlad, he then is betrayed and dies relatively soon later. But we've talked a little bit about Vlad. We haven't dove in directly, but we did cover some of the things that he did. And he's not a saint, but he's a great Orthodox warrior for sure. And the similarity here is going to be St. Stephen resisting the encroachment of the juggernaut and the menace of the time, the Ottoman Empire, and Mehmed II. Now, unfortunately, for St. Stephen, one of the ports that is going to be so crucial to today's story, he dies with that in Ottoman control. But again, we're going to get into the names and the dates and all that stuff leading up to this. But St. Stephen, a few things that I put together, just try to give an introduction to who he is. Unlike Vlad, he is an incredible Orthodox Christian. I mean, one of the things that I found is upon military victories, every victory he had, he believed that it was the will of God, and that, like David, he attributed God's will to all his military success and built churches and monasteries. So many of the monasteries and churches in Moldavia and Romania, because essentially parts of his empire is now part of Romania. So he is considered a Romanian saint. But he would have consultation with monks, and one in particular, Saint Daniel the Hesychist. He would consult him after defeat, mostly victories, And at one point, he goes to Saint Daniel and says, "Look, the Ottomans are coming. I don't think we can win. I don't think we can win. Should I just submit?" And Saint Daniel says, "No, God is with you. God will help you protect Moldavia." And so, you can see the connection between Saint Constantine the Great and the founding of the Christian Roman Empire, because it is Saint Stephen was inspired by St. Constantine going into battle under the banner of the Christian cross and defeating pagans in battle. And of course, that's what they viewed the Ottoman Muslims as. So this man was deeply, deeply faithful. And there's stories that I was reading about after points of victory where all his soldiers, they would have these huge tent parties. There'd be lots of drinking, celebration. He would actually retreat to monasteries to, again, consult with monks and holy men. And so this is one of the things about us Orthodox Christians and how we view saints, is that, Saint Stephen was not perfect. And like King David, one of his weaknesses was women. And he had multiple children out of adultery. He had multiple girlfriends. I think he had 3 official marriages. So he had the same sort of predilection and temptation that somebody like King David had, but he was aware of this, and he actually confessed these sins to Saint Daniel. And so this is one of the things that comes up over and over in his story, is how humble and pious he was as a king. And in fact, what was another interesting thing that I found is that the boyars, the nobles of the time, they did not like him that much. You could consider them the sort of the aristocrats, but the common folk, the peasants, and even the lesser nobles absolutely loved him and viewed him as a protector and a savior of their nation, and a defender of the Orthodox faith. And so, I'm going to talk about maybe a few other potential, when you think of great Christian warriors, again, my personal favorites, as we've talked about, Alfred the Great for the Anglo-Saxons, St. Constantine the Great. And I'd have to say St. Stephen may be my new favorite warrior king. And I have to confess, and I'm sure most of the people watching this stream, is I didn't know that much about him. I was aware of him. I was aware of sort of his importance regarding Romania and Moldavia, but I didn't know the details of his story. And so as we go through, and especially the last half of today's stream, we're going to be watching this video. It's an animated video, but it is the best one I could find covering his life and really his military legacy. He's an incredible inspiration. He's a man with flaws. He's a man that's devoted to his faith. He's a man that's devoted to his people. He's a man in an incredible, wait till we get into the historical context of the time in which he's living. I mean, he's surrounded by the Hungarians and the Polish-Lithuanian empires, who they themselves will align one day with the Ottomans. Then they're against the Ottomans, both of those territories wanting to take over his territory. He's backstabbed and betrayed by his own cousins, Vlad and his brothers, and some of the successors afterwards. And yet he continued to persevere. He continued to never budge on making his claim on his territory, being an Orthodox Christian nation. And so I would say that, at least in my opinion, I'm going to place him at number 1, giving the historical context of his situation. Obviously, we talked about Alfred the Great and the Vikings and what was going on in that time period in England. And obviously Constantine the Great, I mean, battling the pagan half of the Roman Empire to sort of establish dominance. But it's Stephen the Great who goes to battle at Vislui, outnumbered. He has 40, we believe around 40,000, certainly not more than that. And he has 40,000 soldiers, and he's up against what we know for sure is 80,000 to 100,000 Ottoman soldiers. So he's doubled, outnumbered. I read one account that believed that it was upwards to 120,000. So we'll go at the high end of a general consensus. We'll say it's 100,000 Ottoman soldiers coming to his territory to do battle. And he ends up defeating them. An incredible use of guerrilla tactics. Again, we're going to see all this in the military video. Guerrilla tactics, military tactics, One of the things that they played music to confound them. So during the battle, we're going to see that it's a snowy, fog-filled valley and swampy area that he already chose because him and Vlad Tepes, Vlad Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, about 20 years earlier had won a battle at that spot at Vaslui. And so he chose the location for the battle. And there was so much fog, the Ottomans couldn't tell where they were at or where they were. And once they started to get close, they started to play drums and music and really just scared the shit out of the Ottomans and then slaughtered them on the battlefield, forced Mehmed II to retreat. And they killed 40,000 Ottomans. So 40,000 Moldavians under St. Stephen the Great killed up to 40,000 Ottomans. So that would give you somewhere around 60,000 that fled, if not more. Again, the numbers are rough there. So this guy was incredible. And again, he reigned for 47 years. He has, I think, 37 official military battle victories, every one of which, again, he built a church or a monastery for. So just an incredible figure. And, you can compare it to somebody like Richard the Lionheart. Again, these aren't Orthodox. As I said, when I think of Orthodox great military leaders, I think of Alfred the Great or Constantine or some of the Byzantine emperors, military generals. But his legacy is one of building all these monasteries and contributing to the Orthodox culture. And one of the things that is different from other emperors or kings, Christian kings, is that he totally submitted to the church. He never tried to influence the church through his political power or his military prowess. He always submitted to the monastics as guides for his military conquest. And he viewed his work as somebody who was, again, he confessed his sins to St. Daniel the Hesychus, about all his adultery, about his predilection for women, about, the temptation he struggled with through his life. But Daniel said, the fact that you're repenting, you're the king, the fact that you're the voivode, you're coming here and repenting this stuff when, again, all your soldiers are out here celebrating, you're chosen. This is the sign of humility. God can use you as a vessel. And that's exactly how he viewed his entire career. And really, again, much of the Orthodox heritage in that region, the Balkans, is attributed to St. Stephen the Great as being the last frontier. And again, in 1475, when he, at the Battle of Vaslui against the Ottomans, the Lithuanian Polish Empire, the Hungarians, the Wallachians already went ahead and said, okay, we'll be a vassal state. We'll pay our money to the Ottomans. It was only Stephen that said, hell no, we're going to fight. And all the surrounding nations thought there's no way in hell this guy's going to win. Like, he can't beat the Ottomans. And so you could argue, I could make the case. I think you could, anybody could, if they wanted to, make the case that St. Stephen the Great's victory at the Battle of Vaslui may be one of the, if not the greatest Christian military battle in history. I think another one could be Michael the Brave, Romanian, and that comes in the following century, in the 16th century. And that might be an interesting stream in the future to dive into Michael the Brave if you guys aren't familiar. But against all odds, St. Stephen came out victorious. And so I had a few different points that I wrote down regarding, I was just comparing, like, what archetype, what does St. Stephen remind me of? And I came to the conclusion of King David. And here's a few points that I wrote down. So obviously they shared, a sinful desire for women. This was St. Stephen's weakness. He had multiple wives, numerous illegitimate children. He was noted for his ruthlessness in battle, his military prowess, his incredible tactics of deceiving and outwitting his enemies. He had very harsh justice. So he executed multiple treacherous boyars. Again, these are the nobles of his country, and they would go back and forth with some of the surrounding nations. They would make secret agreements with the Ottomans to maybe be subversive towards St. Stephen the Great. And that's one of the reasons why the common people beloved him, even during his life. And this is one of the few examples of a warrior king that even during his lifetime, people were referring to him as the holy. He was already being viewed as a saint in the making during his life. And so some of the parallels though that I want to have with King David is one, they're chosen by God. I truly believe if you dive into his story and some of his military conquests, David was anointed by Samuel. Stephen was enthroned by the church's blessing. Both saw their rule as graced by the divine providence. And it's, again, one of the incredible things about St. Stephen is that he was not, he was Orthodox Christian. He was a great king, kind of like Vlad the Impaler. The devotion towards Orthodoxy, it's hard to kind of put your finger on. Was he really a devotional, pious Orthodox Christian? Certainly he defended Orthodoxy against Islam. There's, from my reading, there's some going back and forth between Vlad and the Hungarians of maybe, softening up towards Catholicism. We don't know how sincere Vlad's religious beliefs were, his convictions. But one thing you can say about St. Stephen is that he was absolutely first and foremost an Orthodox Christian. And he constantly referred back to the tradition of the church, the tradition of the Holy Fathers, and always consulted for wisdom by the monastics. In other words, he's the defender of people. David fought the Philistines. Stephen defended Moldavia and Orthodoxy against the Hungarians, the Poles, the Lithuanians, and the Ottomans. Both were remembered as warrior kings who safeguarded God's people. And both of them, as I said, were sinners of lust, something that, again, a lot of young men struggle today. And I think because of that struggle, if a masculine Orthodox role model is something you're looking for, I think St. Stephen is an incredible potential patron saint for many people entering the church because, one, he is a man's man, just fact. There's no questioning that. But he was an incredibly pious man, and he struggled with the same thing that so many young men are struggling with today, which is lust. So David famously sinned, desiring Bathsheba and then arranging for her husband's death. Stephen's sin wasn't exactly murder for lust like David, but his strong desire for women and his indulgence in relationships outside marriage certainly draw a parallel between these two. And then repentance. David wrote Psalms of repentance. And Stephen, after every victory on the battlefield, built churches and monasteries as acts of thanksgiving and repentance. And I say, maybe this is a little bit of a stretch, but for me, each foundation then that he built, a church or a monastery, was kind of like a psalm in stone, acknowledging both human weakness and divine mercy, and always giving credit to God for his military victories. And then a pious legacy despite their flaws. David is remembered as a prophet and ancestor of Christ. Despite his sins, Stephen is remembered as a saint, not because he was flawless, but because he fought for his people and continually returned to God in humility. And then another one is, his consulting of with Saint Daniel. David consults the prophet Nathan, and for Saint Stephen, it's the same sort of archetype that he goes and consults the monastic Saint Daniel the Hesychast in regards to what to do next. What should we do as a nation? Imagine that today, a ruler of a nation, let's just say, pick a small country or a small country that's up against, China, Russia, or the United States, and they're getting ready to invade your country. And you don't know if you can win this battle. Everybody around you thinks you're going to lose the battle. And you go to the monk and like, what am I supposed to do? And he's like, oh, God's on your side. You just have to have faith. Make sure you hold up your Orthodox emblems. Make sure you go to battle in the name of Christ, and things are going to work out. Imagine a ruler today saying, yeah, I decided to stand up against the United States because one of the monastics that I'm really close to told me that we're going to win. You just when it shows you the difference between the medieval, the pre-modern, the medieval mindset, where religion and mysticism are totally embedded within politics, society. This is pre-enlightenment, this is pre-rational secularism, all this different stuff. So just an incredible figure. I don't want to spend too much time on the monologue. I really want to get into then the study guide, going over some of the details of these things. And anybody who's Romanian, forgive me. I'm going to butcher all these Romanian names of places. So just forgive me on the outset. I know anybody who's a Romanian speaker, listen to me pronounce some of this stuff's probably rolling their eyes. You know, have a little bit of grace. I'm just a dumb American. So smash that like, guys. We're going to be getting into again some great stuff regarding Saint Stephen the Great, and a major thank you to Tara for sponsoring today's stream. So looks like some people sent in some stuff. Let me see. Major thank you to Christopher Scott for the $5 super chat. God bless you, brother. Thank you for the support. Chair throwing Italian throws in 5, says based. Thank you very much, Chair throwing Italian. Red Fox throws in 10, says not to derail you because this is an awesome topic. Are you attending DebateCon 15 in Nashville? No, probably not. I hadn't even heard of it until right now, Red Fox. I will be speaking at the Orthodox event in Palm Coast, Florida, November 20th through the 21st, I believe, or 21st through the 22nd, with Jay Dyer, FDA, Metropolitan Jonah, and a handful of other, I think, Father Vladimir in Florida. So that's going to be a fun one. That's on Athens and Jerusalem, talking about Orthodox art, aesthetics, philosophy. So I'm going to put together a topic, topics for a speech for that. But no, I don't have any plans of attending DebateCon 15. I was not familiar with it. Is that what modern day debate does? DebateCon? I'm not positive. And then Theo Made Ray throws in 349, says, yes, my favorite saint. I agree that Saint Stephen the Great is one of the most incredible saints. And unfortunately, us Western Orthodox converts, I think that he's kind of overshadowed or just kind of forgotten. A lot of people don't talk about him, and me included. I look back now on all the different topics we've done on military stuff and battles. And I wish I would have known more about Saint Stephen the Great before then. But anyways, great stuff. You guys are going to enjoy. I promise you're going to enjoy the second half of today's stream. To do some quick housekeeping before we get things going. First, actually, I need to give a special thank you to a friend from Greece, Charzanis. He's a member of the Logos Academy. He's been a long-time member of my website. And my godson, some people you may know, Dr. Michael Moeller, just got back from Moldavia in an Orthodox pilgrimage all through the Balkans, and then spent 3 days on Mount Athos. And so I made sure to hook him up with my buddy Charzanis, who lives in just outside Thessaloniki. And they were able to spend time together on the Holy Mountain. And major thank you to Dr. Michael Moeller for getting me the Holy Hierarchs icon here. St. Gregory Nazianzus, St. Basil the Great, and St. John Chrysostom. Beautiful icon. And then a major thank you to Charzanis, who got this one in Greece. This is a literal metal-plated, gold-plated icon of St. Catherine the Great, made in Greece. And I would assume made at the monastery, because it doesn't even have a sticker for sale. So it's not like somebody planned on selling it. But shout out to you, Charzanis. God bless you, brother. Thank you so much for this. This is such a beautiful icon. And I had my wife look up things about St. Catherine the Great, and she found it really inspiring. So major thank you to Dr. Michael Moeller and Charzanis for gifting my wife and I with some incredible Orthodox memorabilia, some icons from their trip to the Holy Mountain there in Greece. So God bless you guys. Thank you for that. And some quick housekeeping here, guys. If you really want to support my work and join our community, we have a great community going on over at the Logos Academy. We just had a think tank meeting last night, and we're going to be doing another one on September 10th on women. We do topic themed think tanks now, and you can go here and look at our last topic theme, which is on Logos theology, and we're going over the Gospel of John chapter 1 here. But we're going to be doing another one September 10th, where we're going to be reading Arthur Schopenhauer's work on women, and maybe some stuff by St. John Chrysostom or some of the church fathers on women and what their role is. And then we're just going to be having an open discussion. Again, our group is for men. The Logos Academy is a men's only academy. And we're going to then be talking about women. And so we just had a fantastic conversation last night. If that's something you guys are interested, please come and sign up, join the Logos Academy. We'd love to have you. We have so many incredible conversations in there. Our meetings are fantastic. We have a Logos Fitness Accountability Group the first Monday of September. If you look at our calendar, you can see we have tons of stuff going on constantly over in the academy. So if you want to join an academy of Orthodox like-minded men who we have private conversations that are, again, a male-only space, we'd love to have you there. It's really an incredible community, and you can see it's a group of men all over the world. Legitimately, we have from Hawaii to Dubai. We got people actually all the way in Australia, New Zealand. So it's all over the United States. We'd love to have anybody who wants to join and be part of our group there. Also, if you would like to sponsor a stream, again, major thank you to Tara for sponsoring today's stream and sponsoring the Baal and Moloch stream. You can do so with this link right here. And I can reach out to you and you can give me a few more details on what exactly it is that you would like for me to discuss. And I will let you know what day I get all the research done, and I will perform it here on YouTube. And you can have access to the study guide. So like today's study guide, if you're in the Logos Academy, you just come up here and you can get the study guides for all the different streams. And so that stuff, new exclusive content, all that is available over here. So if you would like to join, you can do so there. And if you would like to sponsor a one-on-one if you'd like to get a one-on-one session where we get into a private Zoom meeting and talk about any topic your heart's desire, you can do so with that link right there. And also, if you guys are in the market for any Orthodox cookbooks for fasting where you can maintain your gains while also staying true to the Orthodox fast, I highly recommend checking out this book right here on high protein meals. And you can use my affiliate link there and get a discount. So check that out if that's something you guys are interested in as well. Okay, so with that being said, now let's get into our document today, because there's a lot to go over, including where did it go? Here we go. Including the historical context of everything going on. I really want to paint the scene for when we watch all his military battles and Saint Stephen the Great defending his people, understanding what exactly was going on and why this is so significant. So a little bit on his origin. So he's the son of Bogdan the Second. He is the Prince of Moldavia. His mother, as we'll get into, is actually the connection between him and Vlad Tepes in that entire gene pool, that line of the Wallachian leaders. Ascension to power is 1457. So his victories over Petru Aaron, who actually assassinates his father. So his father is actually betrayed and assassinated, and then he kills him in battle and executes him and becomes voivode of Moldavia, king of Moldavia, if you will. And so his reign, as I said, was 47 years. These are some of the historic points. So Kilia here, the port, this is one of the really important things that he conquers early in his reign. This is the point where Vlad Tepes actually had some type of an agreement with the Hungarians, and they took over the port. It's Stephen that has to go to battle and actually reclaim this port, and he's actually injured, and that injury never heals. It's actually with him for the rest of his life. But towards the end of his life, this port is actually taken over by the Ottomans, and you could say that's probably the greatest regret of his life, because he maintains the sovereignty of his nation. He keeps it intact, and it really isn't until the end of his reign where he's weakened, he's old. He's trying to get his son Bogdan in place so that he can then take over and reign. But they do end up losing the two ports to the Black Sea, allowing the Ottomans to have total control and sovereignty around the Black Sea. You could say that's probably his most his biggest regret in his reign. We're going to go over some of the battles here, and I really don't want to focus too much on the battles because we're going to be seeing a video that covers all this stuff. But cultural and religious achievements, like I said, church and monastery foundations. Tradition credits him with building or restoring up to 40 churches and monasteries. The Putna Monastery, considered the Jerusalem of the Romanians, is his burial place and royal necropolis for his family. The Voronet Monastery, known for later frescoes. You may have seen that back when I had Streamlabs actually working the video, and I could do it here on StreamYard. I used to play the music videos tied with the Orthodox chants that I have, and you'd see churches that have all the icons painted on the outside. That goes back to Saint Stephen the Great. Architectural style, I thought this was interesting, is that they had a fusion between the Byzantine style and the Gothic European style to create a unique Moldavian style. Mount Athos patronage, he supported such monasteries as Zografu and donated a lot of money. I found an article. We're not going to read the whole article. I'll give you guys the link, but sent quite a bit of money to Mount Athos, again, because he thought it was his religious duty, because God was granting him these victories in battle. He was constantly doing things for the church in return. Famous battle banner of St. George. St. George is you could say probably St. Constantine is the emperor that he models himself after. And then St. George is his warrior inspiration. He's constantly invoking and referring back to St. George. And I'll actually show you his military banner and the prayer to St. George that they had on it. Let's see, historical context. So again, you got to remember the fall of Constantinople's 1453. 1453. Now, 1457 is the Great Battle of Vaslui. 1457 is when Saint Stephen the Great actually takes over as voivode of Moldavia. So he lived during the fall of Constantinople. The Ottoman Turks under Mehmed II captured Constantinople, transforming the Byzantine capital into Istanbul. This event marked the collapse of Byzantium as protector of Orthodoxy. Moldavia and other Orthodox principalities, Wallachia, Serbia, Montenegro, now stood as frontline defenders of the Orthodox faith. And as we'll see here, we'll talk about the Muscovites and Ivan III. Russia and the Muscovites had not fully risen to their dominance as Russia being the third Rome yet. And so in that intercession period where Byzantium has fallen, Russia is not yet the third Rome. It's Saint Stephen who's literally holding the front line against the Ottoman invasions. Again, and this would be like defeating America or China or Russia. I mean, the Ottomans were a military menace. They were a juggernaut. And so at the time Christendom was divided, you had Catholic Hungary, Poland, and the papacy sought to extend influence eastward, often demanding Moldavia's fealty. The Ottoman Empire pushed northward, seeking control of the Danube Basin and Black Sea trade routes. And then Russia was rising under Muscovy, but too distant in this time to protect the Balkans. Moldavia and Wallachia were therefore essential buffer states. So and then down here, I wanted to get in some of the military and threats and strategies. Obviously, the Ottoman advance, Hungarian ambition. So Matthias, as we'll see, King Matthias, constantly going behind his back, wanting to take his land from him. The Hungarian crown considered Moldavia a vassal state, while Stephen insisted on independence. Again, he was successful in all this stuff. He outlives all these competing kings wanting to vie and take over his land. Polish ambitions. Poland aimed to dominate Moldavia through suzerainty, and especially under John Alpert. And then their population was somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000. The core of the army was a peasant infantry supported by noble cavalry, mercenaries, and light troops. Fortifications, obviously very important. Tactics relied on ambushes, scorched earth, use of terrain, psychological warfare to offset numerical inferiority. And you're going to see this at the Battle of Vaslui. Again, as I said, at most, he has 40,000 soldiers, and he doesn't have a huge cavalry. right? I think the Ottomans had a cavalry of 30,000 horses, men on horses. So they had a cavalry almost the entire size of St. Stephen's army. And of course, as I said, they had somewhere in the ballpark to an 80 to 100,000 troops. I saw some estimates up to 120,000 Ottoman troops. So he used every tactic he could. And scorched earth was a huge reason why they were successful, because as the Ottomans came into Moldavia, he would destroy any potential food resources. He'd poison wells. He would burn any goods that they couldn't carry with them. So as the Ottomans came in, they had no resources to rely on, and they were already tired from the long trek through the Balkans to get up there. And then once they get to the battlefield, again, call it providence or luck or coincidence, there's so much fog on the battlefield. The Ottomans are moving forward, knowing they're somewhere over there, but they can't see them. And as soon as they get close, just a cacophony of bells and drums and noises and screams just totally confuse them. And as you'll see in the video, at one point, they had archers ringing bells and doing drums in the trees. And because the Ottomans can't see, they just start moving towards the noise. Well, that was a tactical, that had a tactical purpose for St. Stephen, because the army wanted to maintain its hiddenness. So while the Ottomans start going up in the woods towards the trees to find these noises, which again is just a handful of archers, then it allowed him to come out of the woods with his smaller cavalry and get them from behind, get them from their flanks, and just slaughter them on the battlefield. Again, defense of Orthodoxy. He was a bastion of Orthodoxy. He's the patronage of the church. Ottoman advance, kind of, again, to give you context, Serbia fell in 1459. They became a vassal. Bosnia fell in 1463. Albania resisted until it collapsed in 1479. So literally the only resistance, I mean, you have the Hungarian Empire, which is Catholic, but in regards to Orthodoxy, all you have is Wallachia, which we consider modern day Romania, and then St. Stephen in Moldavia. So King Matthias Corvinus, King of Hungary, was a brilliant Renaissance monarch. He centralized power, reformed the army, the Black Army, and sought influence in Bohemia, Austria, and the Balkans. Polish-Lithuanian Union was a powerful Catholic state to Moldavia's north. Moldavia often leaned on Poland for protection, but Poland also sought to make Moldavia a vassal. And again, climax in the invasion of 1497, which Stephen crushed at the Battle of Kosman Forest. And then the Basarab princes. So Basarab is the family or the dynastic family that Vlad Tepes comes from. So Stephen's cousins, Vlad the Impaler and Radu the Fair. Radu, you guys aren't going to have a good opinion of Radu. He was basically the brother of Vlad, and he was a total sellout to the Ottomans. Just total sellout. And you'll see eventually he gets killed. But they alternated power in Wallachia, often as rivals backed by Hungary and the Ottomans. And then Wallachia's instability meant Moldavia was often exposed, forcing Stephen to intervene in southern politics. And you'll see this is the common trope throughout the entire reign of St. Stephen, is trying to get somebody he can trust on the throne in Wallachia. The last person he could was Vlad Tepes after they had their own falling out, but then Vlad gets betrayed and killed. The Muscovy Rising. So what's going on in Russia, what we would consider Russia in the future, is that during Stephen's reign, Muscovy under Ivan III was consolidating Russian lands and rejecting Tatar dominance. In 1472, Ivan married Sophia Paleologina, niece of the last Byzantine emperor, giving Moscow the claim as the Third Rome. Though distant, Muscovy rise gave hope that Orthodoxy would find a new protector. Stephen's Moldavia was, in a sense, holding the line until Muscovy could emerge. And then what was going on in Western Europe at the time? The Renaissance. So 1450s, you get the Gutenberg press. You get the first printing press. Revolutionized learning, book literacy, the spreading of information at that time. 1470s, Florence, Venice, and Rome were cultural centers of art and humanism. Again, we've talked about the translating of Plato and the Hermetic Corpus and Marsilio Ficino and Cosimo de' Medici. All that stuff is going on in Italy at this time. And again, during the life of St. Stephen, you have the voyage of Christopher Columbus to the New World in 1492. So this contrast is striking. Moldavia's painted monasteries represent, this is my idea, represented a parallel Orthodox Renaissance, responding not with secular humanism, but with sacral art and theology. And then other things going on in the West was the Hussite wars in Bohemia. Holy Roman Empire was weak and fragmented, more concerned with its internal conflicts. The papacy, popes called for crusades against the Ottomans, but Western kings were divided, distracted by dynastic ambitions. Stephen's victory at Vaslui was celebrated by Pope Sixtus as a triumph of all Christendom, yet in practice, Western aid never fully materialized. And that's kind of the story. He always had to work with the little bit that he had. Major battles. Again, we're going to go over some of this stuff. It's all that's going to be reiterated in the video that we're going to watch. I want to talk a little bit about, because everybody's interested in Vlad Dracula, right? And so what was the relationship between Saint Stephen and Vlad Tepes? Family ties. Stephen's mother, Ultia Maria, was related by blood or marriage to the Basarab dynasty of Wallachia. This made Stephen a cousin to Vlad III and Radu, both sons of Vlad II Dracul. The Bogdan Must dynasty and the Basarab dynasty were interlinked by marriages and alliances and betrayals across the 15th century. Family ties, however, did not guarantee loyalty, as we will see. St. Stephen and Vlad the Impaler, earlier in their alliance, after his father's murder in 1451, Stephen sought refuge in Wallachia. Vlad III, known as Tepes, sheltered and supported him. In 1457, Vlad helped Stephen raise troops to overthrow Petru Aaron, the man who murdered his dad, to secure the throne of Moldavia. Thus, Stephen owed his initial ascension partly to Vlad's aid. Shared Orthodox warrior ethos, both saw themselves as defenders of Christendom against the Ottomans. Vlad's campaigns against Ottoman tribute were parallel to Stephen's later resistance. Both drew from Orthodox traditions of sacral rulership and just war against infidels. Cooling relationships. Despite this bond, their relationship was never simple. Vlad's brutal policies, especially mass executions of boyars and Saxons, unsettled regional diplomacy. Stephen had to walk a careful line between Poland, Hungary, and the Ottomans. Vlad's radical anti-Ottoman stance sometimes endangered Moldavia's strategic balance. And after Vlad's fall in 1462, Stephen did not intervene to save him, showing that political realities outweighed family loyalty. And again, that had to do with the Kilia port, and that Vlad, he wanted it for himself as well, and kind of partnered with the Hungarians and forced Stephen to go to battle to get that back. Radu, again, you guys are going to learn about Radu the Fair. Dude is a total punk, total sellout to the Ottomans. And so Radu, Vlad's younger brother, had been a hostage of the Ottomans in his youth. He converted to Islam and became a sultan's favored candidate for Wallachia. In 1462, when Mehmed II invaded Wallachia, Radu replaced Vlad with Ottoman support. Radu's reign overlapped with Stephen's early rule in Moldavia. The relationship was marked by rivalry and suspicion. Radu was pro-Ottoman, while Stephen increasingly defined himself as a defender of Orthodoxy. Wallachia alignment under Radu threatened Moldavia's southern border, and Stephen fought to secure Kilia, a port that Wallachia and Hungary also claimed. That strained Moldovan Wallachian relationships further. And then the triangular dynamic, Stephen, Vlad, and Radu, again, interesting to say the least. Stephen and Vlad shared moments of alliance, but diverged in method. Stephen and Radu were definitely rivals. There was no friendly relationship until, again, he needed somebody with strength to uphold Wallachia and his southern border. And that's when he actually goes and commissions. We don't know the exact terms, but Stephen, we don't know if he paid the Hungarian king. We don't know what he gave up in exchange, but he essentially got Vlad out of jail, which he had been in for a while, and was being forcibly educated under Catholic doctrines and stuff. Again, there's some speculation. Did Vlad convert to Catholicism? Anyways, once he gets out of prison and he gets back with Stephen, he's Orthodox. Stefan then helps Vlad get back to the throne in Wallachia. Unfortunately, like I said, he dies fairly quickly. And then here's some stuff on him being a defender of Orthodoxy, Orthodox kingship and sacred legitimacy. Divinely sanctioned rule. When Stefan took the throne in 1457, his enthronement was marked by anointing and blessing from Metropolitan Teoctist of Moldavia. This underscored the traditional Orthodox idea that political authority flows from God, mediated through the church. Stefan styled himself, by the grace of God, voivode of Moldavia, a standard Orthodox formula that signifies sacral legitimacy. And his reign embodied the Byzantine and Slavic Orthodox model of pious prince, whose duty was both political and spiritual, defending the faith, building churches, and safeguarding the Christian people. Like I said, he built tons of monasteries and churches. Here's a few, and I have some photos of these on one of the browsers that we'll pull up where the video's in. But in Orthodox thought, such foundations were not only political monuments, but also acts of repentance, thanksgiving, and intercession for the ruler's soul and his people. Integration into the wider Orthodox world, his patronage of Mount Athos. Stephen issued charters and donations to monasteries such as, again, I'm butchering this, but Zografu, dedicated to St. George, a famous battle banner of St. George. I'm going to show you this before we get into the video. And support for Balkans and Russian Orthodoxy. He gave alms and endowments to monasteries in Constantinople, Jerusalem, and the Slavic world, emphasizing Moldavia's role as a protector of Orthodoxy at a time when many Orthodox lands were under Ottoman rule. Liturgical and cultural patronage, Slavonic liturgy. Stefan promoted the use of Church Slavonic in liturgical life and chancery documents, strengthening the cultural religious bond with the Slavic Orthodox world. Monastic centers under his patronage produced chronicles that presented his reign in sacred terms, often describing victories as the work of God. That's how we have actually most of the history regarding him comes from the monastics writing. And then his monasteries became centers of Orthodox sacred art, blending Byzantine tradition with local Moldavian style, notably in frescoes. Personal piety, we talked a little bit about that. Recognition and canonization. One of the surprising things once you dive into him is how popular he is and how important he is to Moldavia and Romania. Yet he was not officially recognized as a saint until July 2nd of 1992. His canonization wasn't until July 2nd, 1992. Incredible that it took that long, when, again, even during his life, people were referring to him as the holy and viewing him as a sort of Orthodox hero, a potential saint in the making. And then I tried to really dive in on his relationship with Saint Daniel the Hesychist, right? And so Saint Daniel was a Moldavian monk and hermit practicing hesychism, the spiritual tradition of deep prayer, silence, inner stillness. You guys know it, I'm talking about. He was known for holiness and prophetic insight and miracles, lived first as a monk at Nept Monastery and later as a hermit in the cave near Putna. And he was glorified as a saint by the Romanian Orthodox Church as well with Saint Stefan in 1992. Their first encounter was the defeat by the Ottomans in Valea Alba in 1476. Stefan, discouraged and seeking guidance, is said to have gone to St. Daniel's hermitage. According to tradition, Stefan confessed his sins to Daniel and asked whether he should continue to resist or submit to the Ottomans. St. Daniel's counsel was he urged Stefan to keep fighting, reassure him that God had not abandoned Moldavia. He also exhorted Stefan to repent of his sins, do justice, and give thanks to God in both victory and defeat. St. Daniel functioned almost like a spiritual father and a prophet to the prince. He counseled Stefan to combine political courage with spiritual humility. Tradition holds that St. Daniel blessed the building of the Putnam Monastery and encouraged Stefan to dedicate his victories and his reign to God. Thus, Daniel embodied the Orthodox ideal of synergy between ruler and ascetic. The prince wields the sword, but the monk wields the prayer. Together, they defended the people. Again, as I pointed out earlier, another parallel with King David and Nathan the prophet. Just as David turned to Nathan after sin and defeat, Stephen turned to Daniel. Both figures remind rulers that victory comes from God and sin must be repented from. And so, anyways, that whole document, that'll be up at the Logos Academy if anybody wants that little study guide for people. And so with that, we're going to get into some of the meat and potatoes of today's stream. So let me pull up some of the stuff that I got. There's a great article that I found. This was the best English article I could find that really it really viewed him from an Orthodox perspective. This is written by Romanians. A lot of stuff, I was finding was secular stuff, talking about military battles and such. This was a great Orthodox view of his importance. Theo Made Ray says it would be cool if they sell Saint Stephen gym merch. He is a good for motivational because he risked his life to protect his people. Absolutely. I need to find somebody to help me create new merch. So if somebody out there is watching this stream now or in the future, if you're good at creating graphics, if you're Orthodox and you want to help me create some super cool based masculine, maybe all black shirts, I'm not sure, with Orthodox themed stuff, reach out to me. I need somebody to help me make incredible based merch, stuff that you can wear out, stuff that you can wear to the gym, stuff that, other guys be like, dude, what is that? That looks sick. So if you're one of those people out there, reach out to me. I'd love to work with somebody. But yeah, that's a great point, Theo. And then Testicular Tactics, again, one of the best names on the internet, throws in two, says, how about that Vlad the Impaler? Yeah, he's going to play an important role in today's video. So he's going to come up multiple times. Let me just check, see if we had any questions or comments on Streamlabs or Dono Chat. Okay, doesn't look like so. Well, guys, to do a little bit of grifting, we need to, help me reach my goal. I've been told by the audience I got to get better at grifting, that I really need to take a page out of Andrew Wilson and Jim Bob's book on how to grift. So if you want to help me get my 20 super chat goal for the stream, we're at 4. I'd greatly appreciate that. And what I can promise you is I will yell goal and hold it for as long as I can. I think I can break a minute. I think I can almost break a minute. So if you guys help me reach my goal, you will get that. I promise. So anyways, I'm not great at grifting because I like to move on with the content. But if you can see that I at least gave an effort to grift, help me out. Anyways, this article, again, it talks about the Chronicles of the Land of Moldavia, written by Georgi Urecki. This is one of the sources that we get a lot of the history from about Saint Stephen. This is his icon, you can see, and the video we watched actually must have used this icon because this is the face that they used to represent Saint Stephen. But the Troparion of Holy Voivode, Stephen the Great, fearless defender of the faith in our country, great founder of sanctuaries, O Prince Stephen, pray Christ the God to deliver us from troubles and needs. Opposing the expansion of Islam in Europe, St. Stephen the Great made Moldavia a gate of Christianity where many of the ungodly ones often had to bow down their heads. Quote, we, with all our power, which was given to us from above by the Almighty God, are always ready with all our strength and all our zeal of our heart to fight for Christianity. Thus spoke the ruler of Moldavia on the 29th of November in 1474. That's, again, just before the great battle of Vaslui. You could argue the greatest Christian victory in European history. You can make that claim. You may disagree. You may have other battles. That's fine. It's certainly it's a subjective thing, but it has to be in the top 5. Whether you think that St. Stephen and his victory is the best or not, questionable, but it's got to be in the top 5. Average YouTube Enthusiast throws in 10. Thank you so much, Average YouTube Enthusiast, for the support. Truly appreciate that. And Austin DeTulio throws in 10. Thank you so much, Austin. Says, for the goal. Austin, thanks for all your support, brother. Really appreciate it. The Turks greatly fear this ruler, wrote Venetian Matteo Muriano in 1502. Quote, he is a very wise man, worthy of much praise, much beloved by his people because he is merciful and right, always ready and generous. In my opinion, wrote another contemporary of St. Stephen the Great, the important Polish chronicler Jan Dugals, He is worthy to be entrusted with the leadership and reign over the whole world, and most of all, with the leading position against the Turks, with the consent of all Christians, considering that the others, the Roman Catholic kings and rulers, spend their time only in idleness and civil wars. Christianity saw in his ruler a hope to combat the chaos that was about to be installed in Europe through the expansion of the crescent moon, the insignia of the Ottoman Empire, to the Danube. Quote, "Your works against the ungodly Turks, our common enemies, accomplished until now wisely and courageously," wrote Pope Sixtus to St. Stephen the Great on the 20th of March, 1476, "brought so much glory to your name that it is now on the lips of everyone, and you are greatly praised by everyone. With one heart, for the work you have accomplished, you are still accomplishing with godliness and glory. We should indeed thank you." And this was a comment by Patriarch Daniel of the Romanian Orthodox Church. Although there were other rulers who also built churches and monasteries, none of them were so honored by the people as St. Stephen the Great and the Holy, because nobody else put himself so often in a state of sacrifice, of sacrificial love for the faith and his people. His victories came from God, and he received them as a gift, just as a candle receives its light, and all rejoice in it, and much praise, giver of light. The power of St. Stephen the Great came through the grace of God that dwelt in his heart. He could say together with the Apostle Paul that, quote, "We have this treasure in jars of clay," to show that this all-conquering power is from God and not from us. Aware of the nothingness of human nature and its power, and at the same time being grateful for the grace of God, St. Stephen the Great understood that the key for conquering every evil, seen and unseen, personal or common, is a humble heart, which attracts the grace of God and the help of his saints. Stephen did not become arrogant after his victory, writes chronicler Jan Douglas, that's the Polish guy. After his victory at Vaslui, he fasted 40 days with only bread and water, and gave orders in all the country that no one should dare to attribute the victory to him, but only to God. Again, what can you imagine a contemporary ruler that actually talks like that and does something like that? Just an incredible. This is a statue of him. I believe at Vaslui, again, signifying his victory in battle. Here is Stephen's the Great legacy. Stephen was great because he was humble. The more he humbled himself so that God could see him united with his people forever, to get to a nation's heart, the narrowest of gates. If you are not sacrificed in their tears, you cannot reach eternity. And this is the statue of St. Stephen the Great in Kishnev's Great National Assembly Square, and was installed between the two world wars, when the historic Romanian region of Bessarabia was part of the Greater Romania, just as it had been part of Prince Stephen the Great's Moldavia. To help the military saints was constantly invoked by the great Prince of Moldavia. To ensure their help, he fought some of the battles exactly on their feast days. The Battle of Ramnik from 1481 was started on St. Procopius's feast, the 8th of July. The Battle of Corti started on St. Demetrius's day of the 26th of October. The 1473 campaign in Wallachia was on the 8th of November, the feast day of the Archangel Michael. About the first battle mentioned above, chronicler Georgi confessed, quote, "They say that holy martyr Procopius was seen above the army of Stephen, coming to his help and giving courage to his army. This account is worthy to believe because once the army returned with Stephen, who received great honor as a conqueror at the seat of Scuvea, Stephen founded a church dedicated to the holy martyr Procopius in the village of Baduti, which exists to this day." And here's a little picture of it. This is a Romanian historian. The reign of Stephen the Great occupies a preeminent place in the history of Romanian people. This perception is not a late creation, a myth forged by a circle of scholars or a political regime. This is the banner that they would fly. So we talked about Stephen the Great's banner and his tribute to St. George. "O holy martyr George, who are patient in torments and bearer of victories, quick defender and warm helper in our needs and troubles, unspeakable joy to the afflicted, receive this prayer from your humble servant, Lo Stephen Voivode, Stefan Voivode, by the grace of God, Prince of Moldavia, and preserve him unharmed in this age and in the one to come, for the prayers of those who honor you, so we can glorify you forever in eternity. Amen. And this is the banner of Stefan the Great, was donated by the Prince the Zographou Monastery on Mount Athos around the year 1500. Now it is displayed at Romania's National Museum of History in Bucharest. This talks a little bit about St. George and his importance. This was an icon that St. Stephen actually had made, which shows St. George offering the monasteries that St. Stephen had built to Christ, demonstrating that he wanted to dedicate all his victories and be blessed by Christ. Also talks about his relationship to the Mother of God, the Holy Theotokos, and many of the different saints that he appealed to in his various battles and military conquest. In 1463, Stephen the Great made a reliquary of the head of St. Simeon the Stylite from the wonderful mountain which he kept to this day at Nemet Monastery. This saint lived in the 6th century near Antioch and reposed to the Lord on the 24th of May, 596. On the 1st of May, 488, the voivode placed in a reliquary the relics of the holy hierarch Gennadius and brought them to put in a monastery. St. Stephen the Great was closely involved with the fate of the monasteries of Mount Athos, providing material support to them. Among them, the monastery which received the most gifts was Zographou Monastery. We mentioned that. And so, anyways, I'll read this last section here. And then if you guys want to, did I already share this link? If you guys want to read the rest of this, is probably one of the better articles, as I said, I found in English. So you guys can check that out there. I just want to read this last section. Documentary sources from the 15th century certify that even in his lifetime, people attached the attributes of a saint to Stephen the Great's name. Thus, the anonymous chronicle of the land of Moldavia, describing the events between 1475 and 1481, mentions that the ruler of Moldavia returned to Skuljeva as a trophy bearer and a tribute of St. George's and Demetrius, but also of Constantine the Great. The latter was very likely the foremost life model of Stephen the Great, meaning Constantine the Great was the model that he tried to strive to. A poll passing through Moldavia in 1575 noted that Stephen, quote, because of his undefeated bravery, is considered a saint by the Moldavians. The Polish chronicler Belski also wrote in his Chronika Polska, for those great victories, even if he had a small country, even if history, let me restart. For those great victories, even if he had a small country, every history book could place Stephen next to the greatest and most important army leaders. This is why even the Moldavians call him Kara Bogdan, meaning cherished Bogdan. And for this bravery beyond all measure, they consider him to be a saint. And this is from King Ferdinand, the unifier of Romania. Stephen of Moldavia, you have lived for centuries in the souls of Romanians, and you will live forever. Inspire our hearts with the spirit of holy union so we can carry forward the heavy burden of our united sacrifice. So anyways, you guys can check that out. I again went through the Wikipedia stuff for today's stream, went through the Orthodox Wiki. This is a nice little OCA article. Kind of covers everything that we've already said, but I'll share that with you guys if you want. And then let's see. This is the video that we're going to be watching today. We're going to watch all 51 minutes of it. This is a movie that I was actually watching a little bit of. This is a Romanian film on Stephen the Great in the Battle of Vaslui in 1475. I'll share. This is a free movie on YouTube. So it must be because it's Romanian or something. But you guys can actually watch this for free on YouTube if you like. So, all right. With that being said, now let's get into this video, because let me slow it down too, because I always speed everything up. And this is going to cover the incredible life and military success of this man. So, all right. Without further ado, and I'll be clicking and stopping as we move through this, but this was, again, I watched a bunch of different stuff. A lot of it was boring. It's kind of sounds like somebody reading something. This was by far the most engaging video I could find. And I love these military videos. So when they show how they go in battle and how they won in battle, I told you guys I watch these stuff all the time. Kings and Generals. This is from Nalegia. So shout out to them. Big YouTube channel, 2.1 million subscribers. Real quality content, and it came out 2 months ago. So it's perfect timing for our stream today.
Great.
Here, let me start from the very beginning.
Stefan the Great, the champion of Christ, cousin of the notorious Vlad the Impaler, nemesis of the mighty Mehmed the Conqueror. Stefan III of Moldavia is remembered today by those across Moldova.
We had a couple super chats that just came in. Snaggleby says we have to get that goal shout, folks. Get to it. Yeah, that's exactly right. Thank you very much, Snagglebeast. And Brady Harvey throws in 5, says, dang, I'm late. YouTube for no notification. Yeah, that seems to be a common theme for people subscribe to my YouTube channels. They don't get notifications. FDA says I've been there. Oh, very cool. Shout out to FDA. God bless you and the family, brother. Okay, let's get into our video.
And Romania as a national hero and a canonized saint. This is his story. The exact year of the mighty Stefan's birth is unknown, with estimates ranging from 1433 to 1440, although one could guess that the date would fall closer to the earlier years given the prince's closeness in timeline to Mehmed II and Vlad III, both born in the early 1430s. Stefan was the grandson of Alexander the Good of Moldavia and the son of Bogdan II and Maria Altea. Historians speculate that Stefan likely had around 5 siblings, although with the great commonality of illegitimate offspring in Stefan and his father's time, that number may be quite different in reality. Stefan himself is also believed to have fathered a handful of legitimate and possibly many more illegitimate children between his multiple wives and affairs. It's assumed that the great Moldavian fathered 2 or 3 sons named Alexandru alone, with one having been from a woman by the name of Marushka or Marika, that some claim to have been his first wife, though the legitimacy of this is scrutinized. Stefan's later wives included the likes of Evdokia of Kiev, Maria of Mangup, and Maria Voykitsa, with all 3 women and other mistresses birthing multiple heirs for the prince. But in spite of Stefan's colorful record when it came to his marital and familial relations, he was and continues to be viewed as a Christian hero. This is in large part due to him being the mastermind of one of the greatest European victories against the Ottoman Empire in all of history, but with additional credit to his insistence on building dozens of new churches throughout his reign. Pope Sixtus IV would award the prince with the title of Adlita Christi for his efforts, and historians note that many Moldavians began to regard Stefan as a saint almost immediately after his death, though he would not be canonized until June of 1992. Nevertheless, a man such as Stefan boasts far more to his story than wives, heirs, and titles. Stefan was a prince, a military commander, and a friend or enemy to some of history's most famous faces, and it all started with the aid and death of his father. Young Stefan's first taste of princedom came when his father named him co-ruler and heir to the Moldavian throne before he'd even reached adulthood. It was also around this time that Stefan's cousin, Vlad III Dracula, had come to seek refuge under Bogdan's protection after being ousted from the Wallachian throne at the end of 1448. The relationship between the boys is assumed to have been good, and when Bogdan was murdered by his own brother, Peter III Aaron, Stefan and Vlad escaped together, and found their way to John Hunyadi of Hungary and Transylvania. The details of what happened over the next few years are murky, but eventually, Vlad would garner enough support from Hunyadi to invade Wallachia, violently oust another cousin of his, Vladislav II, and retake his rightful throne by the end of 1456. During this period, Stefan had either joined Vlad on the military expedition or made his way to his relative's court following the victory. The next year, Vlad would do Stefan the same favor he had received from Hunyadi himself, and Stefan was successfully crowned Voivode of Moldavia. This meant dethroning his uncle Peter Aaron, who subsequently fled to nearby Poland in hopes of...
You guys want it sped up? I see a couple people asking me to speed it up. Everybody complains when I speed it up that they want it normal. Do you guys want normal or 1.25? Let me know in the chat. Do you want normal speed, 1.25? I'm open for either. I listen to stuff at like 1.5, 1.75. So let me know what's the consensus. Okay, no, it's fine with me. Moldy says 1.25. Slow Boy says 1.25. They can slow it down later if they want. That's true. So we got 3 1.25s, 2 fine. Okay, yeah, we'll do 1.25. Okay, let's do 1.25. That should be fine. I watch stuff at I don't know how I do. I just listen. I listen to stuff on like super speed just to get through and try to take in information. So, all right, let's do 1.25. That'll help get through it a little bit quicker.
Slipping from Stefan's vengeful wrath without a scratch. This may have worked at first, but the new Moldavian prince wasn't quick to forgive and forget, nor would he risk another betrayal by his father's brother and killer. Thus, Stefan launched an attack against Poland with the hope of deterring King Casimir IV from backing the pretender. The results of the 1458 campaign was hopeful for the spirited Moldavian. Stefan and Casimir came to an agreement, signing a treaty in the spring of 1459, with the former promising to aid the Poles in their conflicts with the Tartars, while Casimir, who was now confirmed as suzerain over Moldavia, would prevent Peter Aaron from returning to Stefan's princedom. With that, Peter was on the move again, and Stefan's ability to forgive was no more present than it had been before. Peter's attempts to settle in Transylvania were challenged by Stefan's repeated and forced incursions on the Siki lands, and the pretender eventually gave up once more. With John Hunyadi's son now on the Hungarian throne, Peter fled next to Buda, where he was given support and protection. The Moldavian prince would give his uncle a momentary break from being on the run, but this would not be their last encounter just yet. Nevertheless, Stefan had more to focus on than just his enemies. In fact, he was strategically looking to reduce the number of those he had, and thus he now sought to implement friendly relations with both his allies in Poland and with the Ottoman Empire. Having agreed to pay a yearly tribute to the latter, the Moldavian would begin to see the Sultan as more of a friend than his own blood over in Wallachia, in an unusual shift of allegiances. For reasons we cannot exactly pin down, the bond between Stefan and Vlad was suddenly on a downhill spiral. Distrust was creeping up on both ends, and it seems that both felt a military clash was soon inevitable. It's possible that the motive, at least on Stefan's end, came from the fact that Kalia, which had previously been a Moldavian possession, was now under the guardianship of the Hungarians and their Wallachian allies. Stefan had long wanted to retake the territory, and it seems that its new owners would not give it up without a fight that the wily Prince of Moldavia was willing to start, even if it meant going to war with the cousin who'd helped him take his crown to begin with. By mid-1462, Wallachia was at war with the Ottoman Empire, and Moldavia decided to join in. Stefan, with the help of his Ottoman allies, laid siege to Kalia. Despite the military prowess and numerical capabilities, 8 days after the siege had begun, the Ottoman-Moldavian coalition was forced to accept defeat. Stefan himself had in fact received such a severe leg injury that it would never fully heal, a painful reminder of one of the great prince's few failures, and in the face of a former friend nonetheless. 3 years later, Stefan's determination to seize his principality's former lands was as strong as ever. With Vlad Dracula now imprisoned by his alleged allies in Hungary, his little brother Radu was on the Wallachian throne at the behest of the Ottomans, whom Stefan no longer felt a generously cordial toward. As a result, in 1465, Stefan began a new siege on Kalia. This time, the campaign would last for only 2 intense days, and it would end in the Moldavians' successful capture of the fortress he had yearned for so long. The fallout from this victorious endeavor would be that Stefan had now alienated all who laid claim to Kalia, the Wallachians, Ottomans, and Hungarians. The latter was particularly angered by Stefan's voracious expedition, and Matthias Corvinus quickly gathered his own force to retaliate, and thus carried out an invasion of Moldavia. The Hungarian king managed to seize the Moldavian possession of Baia, but would later scarcely escape with his life intact as the war effort collapsed, and Stefan retook the captured land. If anything important had come from this, it was the fact that it only solidified Stefan's loyalty to Casimir as opposed to Corvinus. Stefan knew that warfare had been, and still was, a constant during his dynamic reign, and having strong allies was crucial if one was to protect his own territory. Thus, as the Moldavians restarted their raids into the Hungary-aligned region of Transylvania, Stefan swore fealty to the Poles once again. If he was now to face his neighbors in Wallachia, the Hungarians, and the Ottomans, he needed someone at his side when duty called. But the Polish-Moldavian alliance had required Stefan to make new enemies in the form of the Tartars, and in 1470, those of the Golden Horde launched an incursion into Moldavian lands. After initially wreaking havoc through Poland, an occasion that Casimir had failed to prevent nor put an end to, the Tartars made their way to Moldavia in hopes of doing the same. Here, it would be Stefan who would rain on their parade and rout the invaders in multiple face-offs, finally giving the death blow near Dniester. To no one's surprise, the Wallachians were next to try their hand at defeating Stefan, now launching a hopeful campaign to retake Kalia. But this too would follow.
And this is Radu III. This is Vlad Tepes, Vlad Dracula, Vlad the Impaler. This is his younger brother, the guy who, again, it's speculated, but many people believe that he converted to Islam. He was in the pocket of Mehmed. He was a huge crony of the Ottoman Empire. And he basically there's no resistance at all, just was totally okay with being a vassal state. And so, these incursions, this battle is going to go on for a while here between Radu and Stefan. But again, just think of the historical situation here. We're talking about St. Stephen the Great. His father is killed by his father's brother, Stefan's uncle. Stefan was being groomed to become the next voivode, the next king. Then he loses the crown. Again, Vlad, then his cousin, helps him get the crown back. His uncle's on the run, who eventually he's going to defeat in battle, and he's going to execute him. You're going to see here in a bit. Then his cousin Vlad, who helped him get the crown, partners with the Hungarians and tries to take Kalia, the port, to the Black Sea, an incredibly important port for Moldavia. And then eventually he takes that over, but has a wound in his leg that's going to be with him for the rest of his life. And now again, you just saw how he defeated the Tatars, the Golden Horde coming, couldn't be stopped by the Lithuanians and the Polish, a bigger empire than Stefan, but because of his military expertise, routs them immediately in battle, multiple battles. And so it's just an incredible, when you look at the historical context, it's an incredible dynamic. I would argue that Stefan's greatest ally is actually Ivan III in Moscow, of the Muscovies, but he's too far away to actually help him. He sends a few troops at different points, but really they had a very, very cordial relationship, and that was because they were both pious Orthodox. But you look at Stefan, he's surrounded by the Hungarians who won his land. The Polish-Lithuanian Empire wants his land. Wallachia is ruled by essentially a stooge of the Ottoman Empire, working with the Ottomans to take his land. I mean, the dude is surrounded by threats, and he reigns successfully for 47 years as voivode. I mean, it's really incredible when you start thinking of the historical context and the amount of pressure he had. Like, he could have just submitted and been a vassal state and pay the money to the Ottomans, like some of these other territories do. But he does do that a couple times towards the end, but then always goes back to battle and tries to establish some type of independence. Towards the end of his life, they actually are a sort of vassal, and that's because we'll see that the Ottomans actually take all the ports to the Black Sea. But just incredible, like the context of all this is just absolutely incredible to think what this man went through, and then think about all the building projects that he was undergoing in Moldavia. It's incredible. Scoopy throws in 5, says, thanks for the stream, brother. Well, thank you very much for the support, brother. God bless you and the family. Keenan Beach, shout out to Keenan Beach, throws in 5. No comment. Shout out to Keenan and all the creative works that he's a part of. God bless you, brother. Tara, who sponsored today's stream. Shout out to you, Tara. Thank you again for sponsoring a second stream. She sponsored this one and the Baal and Moloch stream. She says, great stream. I found it easier to pronounce Romanian if I pretend I'm reading Italian. Don't tell my husband. Okay. All right. Well, maybe that's a good tip for me, because I feel like I'm just butchering some of these Romanian words and places. Slowboy Whiteboard throws in 5, says, let's get this goal, guys. Well, thank you so much, Slowboy. Really appreciate it. And Nick throws in 5, says, these videos make me want to play Total War. Great PC historical strategy games. I know what you're talking about. And Darth Grumpy Dad throws in $2, just gives a salute. Well, God bless you, brother. Thank you for the support. Okay, let's get back to it. I just wanted to make a quick little comments about, what's going on here in the historical context and why this is so significant. And just to think about being surrounded by essentially enemies.
Apart. The ensuing months would see Stefan preoccupied with repeated clashes against his neighbors in Wallachia, giving the prince's much-forgotten uncle and rival a chance to weasel his way back into the picture. While his nephew was busy defending his border, Peter began rallying support among the Sikis of Transylvania, convincing himself and them that, with their aid, he could retake the Moldavian throne. While Peter would ultimately succeed at gathering troops and invading his homeland, he had been wrong about everything else. Stefan crushed his challengers and took his uncle captive, naturally having him executed and ridding himself of the nuisance once and for all. And then it was back to war with Radu and the Wallachians. As this rivalry carried on, Stefan's relationship with both the Poles and Ottomans was rapidly deteriorating. Bickering over who didn't do enough for who with Casimir echoed debates with Mehmed about who should possess Kalia. Knowing that he may be on the verge of turning two once allies into enemies, Stefan opted to send envoys to his Hungarian counterpart with the goal of at least winning over Corvinus. By the end of 1473, the Prince of Moldavia had had enough of the Sultan and his puppet next door. Having ceased paying his yearly tribute to the Ottomans, Stefan kicked off a new invasion of Wallachia, this time aimed at ousting his little cousin in favor of a new protege, Basarab III Laiota. A week of battle and overpowering the Wallachians saw Stefan victoriously seize the neighboring throne and crown Basarab Laiota in Radu's place, though this would be short-lived. It wouldn't be long before the Ottoman-backed Radu came marching back and deposed the newly placed voivode. Basarab then returned, and the exchange happened again. More repetitions would play out before Radu finally fled, letting Basarab at last establish a real reign over the Wallachian Principality. But this was far from the end of Stefan's troubles with the Ottomans. In fact, it was only the beginning. While the whiplash over who would rule Wallachia had been occurring, the Ottomans, Wallachians, Poles, Hungarians, and Moldavians had all been preparing for war and engaging in it. In January, Stefan's only accomplishment wasn't reseating his protege on the Wallachian throne. His greatest accomplishment was winning one of the greatest military victories in European history. As Basarab Laiota and Radu fought for control over Wallachia, the relationship between the heads of Moldavia and the Ottoman Empire was utterly falling apart. To make the situation even more complicated, in the chaos, Basarab had turned his back on his biggest supporter in Stefan. Once established on the Wallachian throne, Basarab had caved under the pressure of the Ottoman Sultan, essentially agreeing to vassalship under Mehmed as opposed to Stefan and his ally.
Which is the running theme throughout Stefan's, reign in life, is that whoever gets on the throne in Wallachia ends up just, conceding to be a vassal of the Ottomans.
Tensions were building, and war was nearing. Stefan, knowing that it was only a matter of time before he would again be facing off with the Ottomans and Wallachians, began to enlist support from his fellow Christians. His effort reached all the way to the Pope himself, but the aid he actually received was less impressive than he had aimed for. Both Hungary and Poland, very likely due to their proximity to Moldavia and the dangers they would face if Stefan were to lose, offered support in the form of troops. The kings of both neighboring countries gave around 2,000 men to assist the Moldavian cause, in great contrast to the 5,000 Siki men that Stefan himself was able to win over. The Moldavian army alone numbered around 40,000 men, showing clearly the reluctance with which Stefan's Hungarian and Polish allies wished to truly join his fight. And with this, the Moldavians would thus be greatly outnumbered. The Ottoman cavalrymen numbered around 30,000, with the entirety of the invading force coming to at least 60,000. Furthermore, Basarab Leota had now fully invested himself in his newfound alliance with Mehmed, and subsequently offered another 17,000 soldiers to join those under Hadim Suleiman Pasha at Mehmed's orders. With each army established, the clock ticked ever closer to the moment of battle. By the time Suleiman Pasha's force had arrived in Moldavia, Stefan had already been preparing for their arrival. Much like other military geniuses of his time, the Moldavian prince enacted a combined policy of scorched earth and tactical sabotage. Wells were poisoned, and any potential food or supplies left behind were burned and destroyed, leaving the already tired Ottomans after their long journey in an even more difficult position. Guerrilla attacks followed, and it seems that Stefan and his men were off to a good start. The goal was to lure the Ottoman forces near Vaslui, an area where an innocent teenage Stefan had stood his ground alongside his older cousin, Vlad Dracula. He knew this battlefield like the back of his hand, and was certain that it would prove advantageous for his own men. The marshy valley the voivode aimed to utilize was engulfed by forested hills, and the worn-out invaders would struggle to march through the unideal terrain. Even just to reach the full extent of the Moldavian troops, the Ottomans would have to cross the brittle Podul Inalt over the Barlad River, a bridge that could scarcely support the crossing of an army. Nevertheless, Suleiman Pasha led his men forth, and Stefan readied his. Thick fog blanketed the valley and its surroundings. Moldavian archers, cavalry, and cannons were peppered throughout it. The Ottomans were close, but caught no sight of the defenders. Moving through nearly non-existent visibility, a portion of the Moldavian army and its Siki allies were accompanied by a handful of musicians as they marched toward the center of the wet valley. On cue, the musicians began to play their instruments, the sound of drums and bugles startling Suleiman Pasha and his men as they scrambled to catch a glimpse of their enemies through the thick fog. Unable to do so, the Ottomans assumed that in the direction of the instruments, they would find the whole of Stefan's forces. This was, of course, not the case at all. Stefan was more competent than to throw all of his eggs in one basket, and he in fact had quite a different plan in mind. As the Ottoman forces neared, Moldavian archery and artillery fire began. Cavalrymen came face to face, and in a short amount of time, the battle was in full swing. At some point, the bridge crumbled under the weight of Ottoman cavalry, and the rest of Suleiman's efforts weren't faring much better. By now, Stefan was ordering the engagement of his remaining forces, and the valley was suddenly flooded with Moldavian defenders. Chaos erupted on the Ottoman side, and it wasn't long before Suleiman Pasha...
Base Preacher says, demons do hate bells. I love that. I love that. Habibi, quit the racket. Yeah, Technographic says Muzzies were probably crying out haram to the music being played. Probably true. But again, you could imagine how the cacophony of noises and drums and the lack of visibility totally confused the Ottomans and just sent them in disarray. Again, and imagine this is the preeminent military at the time. I mean, you have the Teutonic Knights, you have some of the Western Knights. You could say that those were the best individual soldiers, like their cavalry, their armed horses. But as a military power, the Ottomans were a juggernaut. And just the whole strategic plan here to get them into this valley, hide people in the woods, create an auditorial distraction, and then go to battle with them. You know, he had a handful of Polish soldiers. That's the red there in the center. But then he's, you know, even with them, he's massively outnumbered, and then chose the right time to attack the flank and come out of the woods with his own cavalry. Just again, it reminds me of the battle with Michael the Brave and his defeat of the Ottomans. Just incredible battle against the odds.
Ordered his men into a hurried retreat. Stefan and his defenders chased their fleeing invaders for days, racking up the total Ottoman casualties by thousands. The end result reaching over 40,000. The Wallachian troops, who had been alleged allies of Suleiman Pasha's side, left the battlefield without a single engagement, with Basarab Laiota abruptly deciding to switch alliances yet again. Basarab Laiota furthermore shunned any remaining Ottomans from his own lands, and with that, the Battle of Vaslui had ended. This victory would be viewed as one of the greatest triumphs in European history. Stefan had been wildly outnumbered and with limited external support, and yet through ingenuity and military aptitude, he had won nevertheless. Despite withholding actual support for Stefan, Pope Sixtus named him an Adelita of Christ in response to his fearless efforts against the Ottomans. Still, the Poles and Hungarians too failed to provide further aid in spite of Stefan's ability to prove his skill set against their shared enemy. And with a furious Mehmed now plotting his revenge, Stefan would likely need it. Amassing minimal assistance from those who could provide the most, Stefan decided to try a new strategy. Having become aware of Basarab Laiota''s early endorsement of the Ottoman war efforts, the Prince of Moldavia was ready yet again to make a swap under the Wallachian throne. But this time, he was going back to an old friend. A cousin, to be precise. Vlad III Dracula, whose life had deteriorated quite tragically after he was forced to face Stefan and the Ottomans at once, had been imprisoned following a betrayal by Matthias Corvinus back in 1462. Now, 13 years later, Stefan reached out to the Hungarian king with an unusual request. He wanted Vlad freed. With no one left he could comfortably rely on, Stefan knew that his cousin was his only hope of retaking Wallachia and standing up to the Ottoman Empire. Vlad, in his own life, had been riotously unwavering in his opposition to Sultan Mehmed, and if Stefan could win his forgiveness, the pair would be a formidable defense unit for the whole of Eastern Europe. And though Corvinus at first refused to support the cousins invading Wallachia together, he did agree to let his prisoner go. How they got back on the same page has been lost to history, but after his return to society, Vlad rapidly restored his relationship with Stefan. The duo agreed to stand by one another and unify the efforts of their principalities, making Moldavia and Wallachia friendly neighbors once more. All that was left now was to kick Basarab Laiota, voivode of Wallachia, to the curb. Unfortunately, still lacking support from the Hungarian king for a war with Wallachia, Stefan was forced to put his plan with Vlad on pause. In the meantime, the Ottomans had been busy wreaking havoc in Crimea and the Principality of Theodoro, something the Moldavian ruler was staunchly opposed to, and thus earned himself further support from the Venetians. Mehmed himself, at this time, was also preparing for another invasion of Moldavia, which he launched in short order. With the help of Laiota yet again and Crimean Tartars, the Sultan came back with a spirit of retribution, hoping to once and for all settle the score after his defeat in Vaslui. By the summer of 1476, Stefan and Mehmed were locked in battle at Valia Alba, and while home field advantage seemed to at first aid the Moldavians, favor quickly turned. The Ottomans, rallied by their leader, brutally massacred Stefan's defenders before the battle was over. It's said that the ground was littered with dead bodies, and even Mehmed's army lost many good men. Stefan himself was soon forced to retreat if he wished not to join his men on the ground beneath his feet.
Now, remember when I was talking about St. Daniel the Hesychast, it's after this defeat that he goes back to St. Daniel. Remember when we talked about it, going over the study guide, and says, essentially, look, I just lost to Mehmed. Obviously the big win in Vaslui. Should I just give up? Should I just, allow the Ottomans to take over and just become a vassal? And he says, no, God is on your side. You have to fight. So keep that in mind after this, because, in a way, Stefan was very broken after this defeat. It caused him to question himself, and we don't know about his faith, but certainly sought counsel with Saint Daniel. And of course, he's going to come back strong as always.
He escaped possibly as far as Poland as the Ottomans pushed forward to take more Moldavian territory. Mehmed's success after the Battle of Valia Alba was less impressive, and soon faced with an outbreak of disease and Stefan's return alongside an army led by Stefan V Bathory, the Ottomans had no choice but to pull out of Moldavia, at last giving Stefan the chance to once more look to his plan involving Wallachia and Vlad Dracula. With Moldavia temporarily at peace yet again, the voivode moved to solidify his loyalty to Matthias Corvinus, anticipating receiving approval for his invasion plan in exchange. And luckily for Stefan, he was right. With the go-ahead from the King of Hungary himself, Vlad Dracula and Stefan of Moldavia laid siege to Wallachia. By the end of the year, Basarab Leota, once Stefan's favored ruler and protege, was on the run, and Vlad III Dracula, after over a decade of unjust imprisonment, was finally back on the throne he had gained all those years ago alongside his cousin. Stefan, through leaving troops behind to aid his new ally, had returned to Moldavia after seeing the invasion of Wallachia through. This was a victory worth celebrating after such a long struggle with Moldavia's next-door neighbor. But tragically, it would be a short time of triumph. Before January 1477 came to a close, Vlad and almost every one of Stefan's bodyguards he'd left for his relative had been slaughtered when the Ottomans reinvaded. Some speculate betrayal was what finally took down Stefan's Wallachian cousin, while others believe it to have been a simple casualty of war. Either way, Stefan had supported Vlad with all his efforts in the final year of his life. But now, the voivode of Moldavia was left with no ally beside him, and no clear protege to groom for the job. He did, nevertheless, have a man by the name of Basarab IV, nicknamed Sepelush, and this man would do for the time being. The Ottomans had reinstated Leota in the place of Vlad Dracula, which, much like his reigns before and after Vlad's younger brother Radu, would not last. Stefan would have none such a circumstance, and entered Wallachia once again to oust his former confidant. Successful, Stefan placed the younger Basarab on the throne in what he hoped would be a more permanent rule. The subsequent months showed signs of promise, as peace treaties were signed, relationships, such as that between Stefan and Casimir, were strengthened, and plans for the future were discussed. Unfortunately for Stefan, however, the Ottomans remained an intimidating bunch. Basarab IV, much like the elder of his namesake, made peace with Sultan Mehmed. The Prince of Moldavia was grudgingly forced to follow suit, his contentment with this fact undoubtedly entirely non-existent. His work in Wallachia was again not finished, and he was now running out of options. Stefan attempted to replace yet another failed student, this time with a man by the name of Mircea, who many historians believe to be one of Stefan's own sons. But this task failed. Basarab IV now had Ottoman support, and for the time being, the Moldavians were unable to overpower them. War broke out on Moldavia's battered soil for another period, and the tireless Stefan was forced to accept that peace was still nowhere in his near future. If Stefan had grown tired of warring with the Ottoman Empire, he was yet to show it. He hadn't backed down before, and he wasn't going to now. The Moldavians' counterpart furthermore had shown remarkable resilience over the years, fighting both Stefan and his neighbors. Neither was going to give up, and thus the rivalry was surely endless, at least until death do them part, and that's exactly what happened. Sultan Mehmed, the great conqueror of Constantinople, died on May 3rd, 1481. The death of Stefan's peer was far from the end of the war between the Ottomans and the Moldavians, but it meant another crucial pause in battle. With the Sultan dead, a clash for who would succeed the throne followed, forcing the Ottomans to pull their attention away from Stefan and his principality. While Mehmed's sons, Cem and Bayezid II, turned their animosity towards each other, the Moldavian prince decided to slip back into Wallachia and settle some unfinished business with yet another one of his former protégés, Basarab IV. It would come as no surprise when the master ruthlessly defeated the student. Stefan discarded Basarab and placed another man, the half-brother of Vlad's Dracula, also named Vlad, on his empty throne. As was the pattern, Basarab soon returned with Ottoman troops in tow, but Stefan had won by skill, not luck, the last time. Thus, not only would Basarab lose again, but this time he was slain in the process. Vlad the monk, as Stefan's somewhat distant relative was known, was secured for the time being as the ruler of Wallachia, but his supports in Moldavia would soon be called into question when the Ottomans came knocking. Despite his endorser's current conflict with the past sultan and his new successor Bayezid, Vlad would accept vassalship under the Ottomans as many of his predecessors had done before. And while Stefan himself was no stranger to doing just that, it had not been his plan now, and Vlad the monk had put himself on thin ice. Prioritizing strategy and timing over his immediate disapproval, Stefan opted to leave his new failed puppet for a bit longer. Instead of invading Wallachia again just yet, the Prince of Moldavia was tactically bulking up his border while looking to new nations for fresh support. In his search, he found Ivan III of Moscow, who would soon form a notable bond with Stefan. This was a great secret weapon for the latter, though it wouldn't yet come in much handy, as 1484 would see the Ottomans return their focus to subduing the wily Moldavian. In 1483, the new Sultan Bayezid and Hungary's Matthias Corvinus had finally come to an agreement of their own and signed another peace treaty to last 5 years, possibly due to Corvinus's need to focus on his unrelated plans in the West. Whatever the reason, the truce was set to include Moldavia as well, although it was agreed that the ports of Stefan's principality would be the exception. And in case anyone had been unsure as to why, the Ottomans soon gave an explanation by launching a new campaign to seize Kilia and later Citata Alba, giving Bayezid and his empire suzerainty over the Black Sea and an upper hand on Stefan of Moldavia yet again. The cornered voivode now had an Ottoman ally to the south, another to the west, and the Ottomans themselves on his own soil. With what one can only assume would have been an immense level of exasperation, Stefan submitted to Bayezid, utilizing his only logical method of expelling the Ottoman armies from his land. Matthias Corvinus was now in a tricky situation. On the one hand, he was determined to maintain friendly relations with Bayezid so he could focus elsewhere. And on the other, he now had a cornered and dangerous Moldavian prince who could blow the whole scheme up in a matter of minutes. Hoping to delay a reaction from the latter, it's believed that Corvinus granted Stefan the territories of Ciciu and Citata de Baeta in Transylvania as compensation, although some historians question the timing of these gifts. Either way, Corvinus was not open to military conflicts with the Ottomans, and thus no consideration was given to the idea of letting Stefan retake his ports. Poland, contrarily, had been watching all of this unfold, and King Casimir was not as forgiving as his Hungarian peer. The idea of the Ottomans controlling Moldavia's ports, and thus the surrounding area, Danube and Dnieper rivers, was an unacceptable one for Poland's Casimir. By 1485, the king had seen enough, and knew it was only a matter of time before his own nation's trade with their eastern neighbors was affected by Bayezid's new territorial control. To what would have been a profound pleasure for Stefan, Casimir's disdain for the Ottoman encroachment pushed him into closer cooperation with the Moldavian. As the fall of 1485 rolled around, Stefan made his way to Poland to personally pay homage to the king and solidify their renewed friendship. Casimir repaid the prince by declaring his opposition to Bayezid's snatching of the Moldavian ports and vowed to never accept the territorial changes without Stefan's personal consent. As invigorating as this all must have been for the voivode, he still mustn't have been surprised to hear that, in his absence, the Ottomans had re-entered Moldavia. Luckily, not much had been done by the time Stefan and his new Polish supporting forces came racing back to Moldavian land. The attackers were routed by the year's end, although the Ottomans still controlled Citata Alba and Kilia. This would have been inordinately aggravating for Stefan, considering the desperate amount of times he had to go to war for Kilia in particular over the decades, even having betrayed his own cousin and been permanently wounded for a losing battle over it. It's not surprising then that a few months later, the voivode again tried to recapture his ports, but still, he couldn't seem to best his foes, a common trend for anyone attacking the fortresses. Having scarcely survived this defeat, Stefan again was painfully forced to consider renegotiating with the Ottomans and paying homage once more to his great dismay. Having been so hopeful at the start of this newest struggle, it seems the Moldavian prince quickly became aware that Poland's support wasn't enough. He thus signed a new truce with Bayezid, promising 3 more years of paying tribute and accepting vassalship. If any part of Stefan had held out hope that his Polish friends would continue the fight without him, as 1489 rolled around, those hopes would have been dashed. Casimir and Bayezid made peace, and the former seemed to have forgotten his existing agreement with the Prince of Moldavia. The King of Poland gave his own consent for the official...
You see, like the story of Saint Stephen the Great, it's constant betrayal. Almost every agreement he makes with somebody, something happens, something goes to the wayside, and he's just constantly struggling to find a true ally in his resistance against the Ottomans.
Acknowledgement of the Ottoman capture of Ilia and Cetata Alba. Stefan, again cornered, saw this as a complete betrayal and breach of his alliance with Casimir, ironically swaying his loyalty back towards the man who'd lost it just before, Matthias Corvinus. Stefan's objective was thus to re-strengthen his relationship with the King of Hungary, as that was by now his best option to protect himself and oppose the Ottoman overreach. Unfortunately for the voivode, much like his plan to solidify Vlad Dracula once more as his next-door neighbor and ally, this one too ended in death. Matthias Corvinus, King of Hungary, died on April 6, 1490. In a similar fashion to the death of Sultan Mehmed, a succession crisis erupted before the ruler's body could even go cold. There would be 4 claimants to the dead man's throne. Corvinus himself had attempted to groom his illegitimate son John for the role, but with his death died that dream. His challengers included 2 sons of Polish King Casimir, John Albert and Vladislaus, as well as Maximilian I of the Holy Roman Empire and Habsburg dynasty. Now, Stefan had to decide who to support if he was to continue siding with the Hungarians over the Poles and Ottomans. Possibly due to his own approval of Stefan, the Moldavian chose to back Maximilian. Standing behind Casimir's sons could risk a future unification of both his unstable off-and-on allies, but there apparently wasn't much benefit from backing John Corvinus either. It would eventually be Vladislaus, however, who would be crowned as Matthias' successor. While Maximilian accepted this outcome and simply abandoned his own claim, John Albert wasn't so quick to give up. Brothers or not, Albert did not want Vladislaus on the throne. This made Stefan's life more complicated, as he now had to decide who to support between the 2 men he had particularly hoped not to see succeed. Knowing that John Albert was already the chosen heir to Casimir's throne in Poland, the voivode eventually opted to endorse Vladislaus, predicting that this case would make a union between Hungary and Poland less likely. Not only had Stefan been stabbed in the back by his Polish ally after the conflict with the Ottomans, but he'd also been tussling with the Poles over the territory of Pokutia, which the prince felt entitled to take back into Moldavian control. If John Albert ever ascended to the thrones of both Hungary and Poland, Stefan would lose his ability to switch up alliances at will, as he'd done all these years, and he would quite possibly be making an enemy out of 2 kingdoms. Thus, Stefan doubled down on his newfound support of Vladislaus, giving him aid when the Ottomans invaded Hungary throughout the low-boiling succession crisis that was still ongoing. He was repaid by the rightful king, who responded by confirming Moldavia's claim to the Transylvanian holdings previously granted to Stefan by Matthias Corvinus. And finally, for Stefan, it appeared that one of his ideals was working out. By the end of 1491, John Albert had finally accepted his brother's place on the Hungarian throne. But the following year, yet another death would stir up new drama. The voivode again had to navigate a neighboring change of power when King Casimir IV died in the summer of 1492. Stefan's tumultuous roller coaster was far from its end. The succession crises that had occurred in the Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Hungary must have had Stefan eyeing Poland with great anticipation after the announcement of King Casimir's passing. Whether he was hoping to see another struggle for power as he'd taken advantage of with Sultan Mehmed's death, or worried about what such a war could entail, as in the case of King Corvinus' death, would be his little secret. But either way, no crisis took place. John Albert would take Casimir's throne in Poland, while his younger brother, Alexander, would be crowned in Lithuania. The Prince of Moldavia now just had to determine how he would react. Throughout Stefan's entire reign thus far, he had shown his remarkable intellect and strategic abilities when it came to handling foreign affairs. He knew at all times to keep a close watch on all of his neighbors and lean in favor of whoever would benefit him and his principality best at the time. Thus, the voivode lacked a strong, immediate reaction to the changes in Poland and Lithuania. Knowing that he had friends in Moscow, Hungary, and part-time allies in Poland and the Ottoman Empire, there was no reason to stir the pot just yet. But when Casimir's sons decided to meet in Lucca in the spring of 1494, Stefan paid close attention. The aim of the meeting between Vladislaus of Hungary, John of Poland, and Alexander of Lithuania was to plan a joint campaign against the Ottoman Empire, which they all could now agree was their shared foe. This spirit of cooperation was, however, quickly tainted by John Albert's own ideas, particularly concerning Moldavia. Despite Vladislaus's friendship with the nearby voivode, John wanted to overthrow Stefan in favor of Casimir's other son, Sigismund. An air of suspicion would soon make its way to the Moldavian prince himself, who thus began to distrust the new king of Poland. Stefan, being the observant man he was, believes that John Albert wanted to strengthen his control over Moldavia, and when John shortly launched an attack on the Ottomans occupying Kilia and Cetata Alba, these fears seemed to be confirmed. Despite a notable effort to stop the Polish king, Stefan was unable to interfere with the campaign and subsequently turned to his ally in Moscow for assistance. Ivan III was quick to back his ally and friend, and thus reached out to Alexander of Lithuania with a request that he stay out of his brother's war. Possibly due to the shared opinions of many Lithuanian nobles, Alexander agreed to steer clear of the conflict and thus save Stefan from an added threat. This still wasn't enough to change the mind of John Albert, though, and by the summer of 1497, Polish troops broke down the door into Moldavia. Stefan had seen this coming. Having made sure to remain on good terms with Sultan Bayezid, the incursion allows the Moldavian prince to receive a few hundred men in arms from the Ottoman Empire to aid his territory's defense. Meanwhile, attempting to end the conflict from both angles, Stefan sent his chancellor, a man by the name of Isaac, to meet with the Polish king and diplomatically request an end to the assault. If John Albert had been a man of diplomacy, his skills at it had surely lapsed at this time, as he responded to Isaac's request by throwing him in prison. The war consequently raged on, as the Poles now pushed deeper into Moldavia. They were expecting additional Teutonic troops to arrive any day, but Stefan himself was welcoming over 10,000 Hungarians onto his side, thanks to John's brother across the border. The Polish king was alone, and the Moldavians had the backing of both Hungary and the Ottomans, as well as help. The Polish troops were contrastingly blindsided by a plague outbreak, and their ongoing siege, not Stefan's defenses, were crumbling to dust. By the end of October, the tables had turned, and the voivode was ruthlessly chasing his invaders out.
What this says over on the side here, the Battle of the Kosman Forest, this is the defeat against the Polish. It says, in a masterful ambush deep in the woods, Stefan the Great of Moldavia crushed the retreating Polish army of King John Albert. Using narrow forest paths, hidden archers, and hit-and-run tactics, Stefan turned the terrain into a deadly trap. The Polish cavalry was rendered useless, and their army fell into chaos. Polish casualties are numbered somewhere between 2,000 to 10,000, with minimal losses in Moldavia. This battle of the Kosman Forest sealed Stefan's reputation as a brilliant tactician and safeguarded Moldavian sovereignty.
Either they left Moldavian soil or died on it. A string of Moldavian raids into Poland reinforced the point in case anyone had misunderstood, and John Albert was now faced with the fact that many before him had too leaned the hard way. Stefan wasn't going anywhere. A new alliance was soon created between Hungary, Poland, and Moldavia, with Stefan further securing his standing as more than just an average prince among kings. By now, though, the crafty Moldavian was aging and had already begun grooming his son, Bogdan, to take his throne in the coming years. The voivode had reigned for decades over a period of relative stability for his people, particularly in contrast to the rapid changes of authority in neighboring Wallachia. To oust Stefan of Moldavia from power would have been as easy as ripping the stars from the sky, and his people, in many cases, adored him. He was viewed by many boyars as cruel and tyrannical, but by the peasantry often as their guardian and a just ruler. This discrepancy may come from his tendency to reward those who supported his strong central government, which often included the lower classes of nobility over the entitled boyars. He was undeniably seen as a supporter of the church nonetheless, as he had many new churches constructed, rewarded the church with lands, and encouraged monasticism. His view on foreigners, however, would serve often as another reason to critique the long-reigning prince, as he was not afraid to persecute certain groups such as Hussites, Roma, and Jews.
So I love that little tidbit there. He had no fear of persecuting certain groups, Roma, Gypsies, Jews, and then Hussites, which are like, proto-Protestants. So again, what a great emblematic figure for sort of masculine orthodoxy, warrior king, voivode, tactician, militarily speaking, and yet a very pious Orthodox defender of the faith. Base Preacher said, I have zero issue with this man. Tara, shout out to you, sister. Thanks again for the support today, sponsoring the stream. She says, wonderful king and defender of his people. Absolutely. Absolutely. We all need to ask for the intercession of Saint Stephen for all of us and our nations. I mean, look at the mass immigration problem in the Western world right now. And, obviously he wasn't dealing with mass migration and replacement migration, coordinated global plan that's underway in the Western world. But at least we could take symbolically Saint Stephen the Great as a warrior, an Orthodox warrior figure that is defending his people, defending the faith, and really not putting up with any nonsense when it comes to religious subversion, especially by other various groups that were occupying territory in his nation. So just a wonderful, wonderful saint, and somebody that I think all converts to Orthodoxy, especially American and Western converts, need to appreciate and just keep in mind. I haven't heard too many people who have taken Saint Stephen as their patron saint, but if I was a young man and I was entering the church, I would give serious consideration to Saint Stephen. What an incredible saint.
Contrarily, though, Stephan was often found to look to experts from outside his borders when it came to expanding his understanding of topics such as politics and the like. It's possible that his involvement with these foreigners helped contribute to his innate ability to play puppet master with his neighbors, moving kings and emperors against each other and in favor of himself like pieces on a chessboard. His awareness and political genius were startling, and a pillar of his reign and ability to maintain power so unwaveringly. His abilities at war were no less dazzling, however, and necessary. If the voivode himself is to be believed, he fought 36 battles and won 34 of them. He often had help from his allies in the form of manpower, which cannot be ignored. But neither can the simple facts that his cleverness and resourcefulness is the reason why he managed to always have aid. Stephan's reputation had been set, but his time as Prince of Moldavia was not over yet. He was tasked with guiding his son in the same direction as he'd gone all these years. One of Bogdan's first and most crucial acts as Stephan's co-ruler was to aid in the renegotiation of peace with Poland, and as of 1499, the end of Polish suzerainty over Moldavia. A year later, the father and son duo would cease paying tribute to the Sultan and send word to Venice with an offer to join the Ottoman-Venetian War and a request for a doctor to help treat Stephan's declining health. Matteo Mariano, a Venetian physician, was sent in response to Stephan's request, but Moldavian attempts to re-engage in war with the Ottomans failed, and efforts to retake Kilia and Cetata Alba came up short. Over the next few years, clashes with the Ottomans, Tartars, and Poles would follow, but peace was eventually made again in 1503, and Stephan agreed to once more pay a yearly tribute to the Ottoman Empire. Before his death, the voivode would press his son on the issue, insisting that he too continue to pay their share to the Sultan. And with Stephan's doctor now deceased, a new request went out for another in hopes of extending his own rule for just a little longer. But the prince was old, drained after so many decades of war and politics. His leg, which had never healed after his clash with Vlad Dracula over his beloved Kilia, was no longer the worst of his ailments. He was fading away, and he could. He had left his mark over 47 years of voivodeship. He had prepared his son to take over his duties, and there was nothing left for him to do. It is only a shame that he died on July 2nd, 1504, knowing that Kilia still remained out of Moldavian hands. It may very well have been Stefan the Great's only regret.
So that concludes our video. And here's some of the monasteries that he founded. The Putna Monastery, probably the most famous, is one of the most important cultural, religious, and artistic centers established in medieval Moldavia, and it was built and dedicated by Stefan the Great. And I believe that's also the necropolis for his family as well. So here's a few of the photos, what it looks like. I'd love to do a pilgrimage to this part of the world one day. And then again, Voronet Monastery. This is again the one that, if you've seen my videos, I have an introduction video that plays the chants, and it's actually a video of this particular monastery where all the icons are written on the outside. This is when I talked about how the West was experiencing the Renaissance. There was also some type of, I called it a sort of Orthodox Renaissance of sacred art and stuff with the building of monasteries. And this is what that looks like. So, and then this is the monastery that that he gave so much money and resources towards on Mount Athos. I was going to get some photos of it. Actually, when we did the pilgrimage with my wife, which you do on a ship because the women and children can't get within like 100 meters of the shore of Mount Athos, but they have a pilgrimage for women. We actually drove by this monastery. It's in the southwestern part of Mount Athos. So anyways, Saint Stephen was a great, great man, and somebody that all of us Orthodox converts, especially us men, should keep on the forefronts of our mind and ask for intercession from him, especially when it comes to like the defending of one's nation, their people, and their religion. I mean, I can't think of a better emblematic figure and saint than Saint Stephen the Great, especially regarding the invasion of Islam in Europe right now. He dealt with the Ottoman Empire. He was, the face of the resistance against the Ottomans, even though towards the end of his life they had taken Kalia and the other Black Sea port. It set the stage for further resistance. It set the stage for somebody like Michael the Brave in Romania in the 16th century for his resistance against the Ottomans. So maybe we'll do another one in the future on Michael the Brave. He's another really good figure in regards to Orthodox Christian, trying to defend his homeland, Wallachia, against Ottoman invasion and Ottoman vassalship and all types of stuff. So that pretty much does the stream for today, guys. I don't really know what else is there to say except how great of a warrior king. And the question that I posed is he the greatest warrior king, at least Christian warrior king in Christian history? I think you can make the case. I think you can make the case that the Battle of Vaslui is, or at least one of the greatest Christian victories in battle in European history. And it's ironic that, so many people have forgotten, and so few people actually speak of the reign of Saint Stephen and what he was able to accomplish and what he was able to do. So if you are a young man, and if your name is Stephen or Stephen, I highly recommend looking into Saint Stephen the Great becoming your patron saint, because we need more Stephen the Greats in the Orthodox world. We need more Stephen the Greats across all, the European or formerly white European Christian nations, because we are under an onslaught right now. And even Tucker, I saw he had a guy on his most recent interview was about replacement migration. The guy wasn't a conspiracy theorist, and I thought he was kind of soft on some of the issues, but he apparently has written multiple books on immigration and what's going on. But England is in a terrible spot right now. Same with, you can, really point to every Western European nation. And there has to be a newfound sense of national identity, pride, and really religion, because there is no resistance against Islam. There is no resistance against the forces of evil. We just had this demonic trans shooter the other day, clearly demonically possessed, probably a product of, some type of neo MK Ultra mind control program, because it fits all the categories, right? He's trans. He doesn't like Israel. He's pro-Palestine, pro-Muslim, has like black sun, Nazi regalia, calls Mexicans spics. It's like if you were an intelligence agency, if you were the CIA, this trans shooter that just happened yesterday literally fit like every category of, American opposition to the official narrative, right? Whatever the official narrative is. And, and now we see like the New York Times he literally shoots up Catholic children, injures over 20 people. And the next day it's like, oh, he hated Jews. He killed Christians. And yet somehow the official narrative is about his anti-Israel stuff, or Israel must die. It's just, Christians are the most persecuted religion in the world. And like Saint Stephen, there's not going to be too many people that come to our aid. He struggled in his lifetime to find allies. And in the same sense, we're struggling to find allies. And we elect people like Donald Trump. And not that we didn't already know ahead of time, but not really the ally we thought we had. He's just now negotiated to bring in 600,000 Chinese students in the U.S. universities, which means that's 600,000 positions at a university that an American cannot actually get into because the position is occupied. It's filled. So, like Saint Stephen, what we need to lean on is our faith in God and our tradition and our Orthodox faith. And then saints and people like him that give us inspiration to say, like, look, we're not pacifists. It's okay to defend your family. It's okay to defend your people. It's okay to defend your faith. And sometimes it's violent. And the men that choose to partake in that endeavor, we have to realize that it is spiritually dangerous. It's always going to be spiritually dangerous if violence occurs and potentially life is lost. We talked about this last night in our think tank about, where is the edge of violence, and, when is it condoned? And just like the trans shooter, say you or I, an Orthodox Christian, was there and we were carrying, and we killed him before he was able to kill more children and injure more people at the Catholic Church, the Annunciation Catholic Church in Minneapolis. You probably wouldn't be served communion for a while. But it's the right thing to do. And we need more masculine men that are willing to actually draw a line. As somebody said in the chat, not one step back. And, even though St. Stephen had to, eventually concede his Black Sea ports, he fought as strong and as long as he could. And that's exactly what we need to do. And we need to have that mentality. We as Orthodox men, and not really, be so concerned with the American empire or defending the military industrial complex or, the Zionist machine that rules our political infrastructure, but our people, our neighbors, our parishes. And we need to really think of ourselves as men, that these are the people that we're here to defend. And this is why, it's important for every man to become, the masculine version of yourself, because that's how God can use you. Like somebody said in the chat, there's so much, this sort of boomer progressive mindset in Orthodoxy that somehow we're pacifists, yet we have a whole history of Orthodox warrior saints, and Saint Stephen the Great is a perfect example of that. We need to develop some type of warrior mentality, and, just getting in debates on X about the Orientals or the papacy. It needs to go deeper than that. Like Jay's got that covered. That's his skill set. That's what Jay does. That's his calling. That's his purpose. But for the average man, for you and me, we need to become the most masculine versions of ourselves so that we can then be helpers. And if duty calls, we can be the warriors that we need. And who knows where, again, America's going to go, Western Europe's going to go. It's going to eventually become violent. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying that that's an inevitability. I mean, you look at what's going on in England with, them putting up the St. George's, flag, the white flag with the red cross, and you're seeing what the Muslims are saying. You're seeing all these street interviews in England about how the Muslims are saying they're there to conquer. It's their land now. There's not really any way out of that besides some type of violent conflict. And we need to really acquire discernment regarding the utilization of physical violence and the maintaining of our Orthodox faith, and making sure that we're staying within the bounds of our faith, but realizing we're not pacifists and we're not going to vote our way out of this. We need to build communities. You and I need to get wives and have children and build families. That's the only way out of this. And again, I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but St. Stephen, I think, inspires us as a masculine role model, as a defender of his people and our faith, that's okay. And in fact, he's venerated as a saint for doing it. So I think those are just important things to keep in mind. And I think, again, a major thank you to Tara for sponsoring today's stream and requiring me to dive down the rabbit hole and look into St. Stephen, because he was, my takeaway was that I was inspired. I'm inspired just to go deeper in my faith. Just like when just like the example of when he won the Battle of Vaslui, he fasted for 40 days afterwards. I mean, this is considered arguably the most important or significant Christian victory in European history. And St. Stephen, he didn't go to the parties. He didn't go to the tent parties with all the girls and the alcohol and probably good wine that his soldiers went to. He went and fasted for 40 days. And that's a masculine role model. That's a masculine role model that I think is good for everyone. So let me just check some of these super chats real quick and see where we're at. All right. That we read that one. Nick throws in 5, says these videos make me want. Oh yeah, we read that one too. Darth Grumpy Dad throws in $2. No comment. God bless, brother. System Blower throws in 10, says donating to support more content dispelling the myth of Orthodox pacifists. Exactly. We're not pacifists. There is no Orthodox nation that didn't have a military. And I think for us young men, it'd be quality and good for us to think of ourselves as Christian warriors. And with that comes with the training of your body. St. Stephen wouldn't be able to accomplish the military feats that he did if he was a soy boy, if he had a weak body, if he's like, I don't know, I think I have scoliosis and I don't want to go to the gym. It may hurt no, dude, like get your stuff together. Get your shit together is what I was going to say. And realize that this is way bigger. Like if you're frustrated with the political scene in the world and you're frustrated with the direction of our nation in America, I'm obviously American, becoming the best version of yourself as a man is the ultimate response to it, because we're not going to vote our way out. This isn't, whatever mechanism that the narrative tells you that you have agency in, that's not going to do it. We need to become the best versions of ourselves. That's the only way forward. So, anyways, thank you very much, System Blower. Nick Bushi throws in 5. The Ottoman Empire has 0 SEC championships. Yeah, exactly. Down with the Ottomans, down with Turkey, down with the Turks. It's still Constantinople, and eventually we will reclaim it. Yes, exactly. System Blower says, become a great man of history. And that may just be a great man in your family. Being a great man of history may not mean that your name's in history books in 100 years, but your name may be on the lips of your children and your descendants in 100 years. We all have an opportunity to create a foundation that lasts generations for ourselves. And maybe none of us may be people of history, significant history, quote unquote. But my goal is that my grandchildren, my grandchildren have very positive stories to tell of myself. So you're still building a legacy one way or another. Tara throws in 5. Thank you so much, sister, for sponsoring today's stream. She says, my husband took me to visit some monasteries built by St. Stephen, as he is from that part of Romania. It's beautiful, and I recommend visiting. I am moved. I want to go do, especially after talking with my godson, Dr. Michael Moeller. Shout out to him again. Very much appreciated for the new icon of the Holy Hierarchs. But I would love to do a pilgrimage through that part of the Balkans. Sounds incredible. Just hearing his journey and his experience. He said it was like drinking from a fire hose. Brady Harvey throws in 5, says, grift for the rest of the goal. Don't let Jim Bob beat you. Goal, get the goal. Thank you, Snaggle Beast. Del Bridge says, do you know any good books about conflict thesis? I'm not sure what you mean by conflict thesis. There's For My Legionaries, and there's the one Resistance Against Evil. Those are the two that I'm thinking of. If what you're talking about is like a Orthodox perspective on physical violence or military or whatnot, I would recommend For My Legionaries and Resistance Against Evil. Those are 2 really good books. Theo Made Ray throws in 349, says, good motivational when having hard times in the West. Absolutely. What we're experiencing isn't as hard as some of the saints have experienced. So looks like we need 4 more super chats for the goal. So if anybody wants me to yell goal here at the end of the stream, we need 4 more. Let me check the Dono chat real quick. Dono chat, Scoopy throws in a very generous $70 super chat over on Donos. Shout out to Scoopy. Thank you very much. He says, I don't often get to catch a live stream. Wanted to thank you for everything through the years. God bless. Lots of love from Canada. Well, thank you so much, Scoopy, for the generous support, brother. Really appreciate that. And if I've helped in any way, glory to God, man. I'm humbled. So thank you for the generous support. Really appreciate that. All right. Hernandez, the hero, throws in 5, says UOF right now against institutions and persons bringing in global technocracy. Is it okay to do or not? Good or bad idea? I'm not sure what UOF means. Can somebody help me out in the chat here? What does UOF mean? What does UOF mean? Somebody help me in the chat. I'm not sure. Oh, use of force. Oh, use of force right now against institutions and persons bringing in global technocracy. Is it okay to do or not? Good or bad idea? With Christian context, please. Well, the general framework from the Orthodox perspective is that we are not instigators or antagonists when it comes to physical violence. We are defenders. And so we respond to the threat of physical violence. What would be the Christian context on the use of force against the development of technocracy right now? Well, I could see somebody from a sincere Christian perspective potentially sabotaging technology through viruses or stuff like that. But again, it's going to put yourself in a particular hotspot amongst the authorities. If anything, again, how successful you are as a hacker or whatever it may be. In regards to physical violence against like Peter Thiel or Elon Musk, I think we have to be careful, because when you look at the history of these things, often when we do participate in violence or force against people in an aggressive manner, it tends to exacerbate and amplify whatever it is that they're doing, and sort of creates martyrs, right? The history of the church is that Christianity spread by martyrs, and offering martyrdom to our enemies, I think, is something we need to take into account. So I think being resistant against all this stuff is the essence of being Orthodox right now in the if you want to call it the end of modernity or the postmodern world or the global technocracy, we have to be speaking out, and we have to be building and working together in opposition to it. Could that be deemed as a use of force? We need to forcibly build an alternative. We need to forcibly build intact, strong communities. We need to forcibly build Orthodox families. I would say to do not engage in physical violence against the builders of the technocracy. There are spiritual powers at work, and so pray about it. Call for the Holy Spirit to give discernment and actions and how exactly we maneuver through all this stuff, because it really is a time of real maneuvership. Like it's all coming right now. The technology is here. Everything that's been speculated, for the last 20, 30 years, we're at a different part in that ball game where some of this stuff is actually here. So, somebody says, what about cutting down CCTV? I think that's great. Like that. I've seen people be doing this in England. Like that is a resistance that is not harming somebody. Right. So if the way you harm the technocratic plan is through their technologies being torn down, that is not a violation of somebody's free will where would be deemed sinful, I would say. Cutting down CCTV, yeah, I think that is a great form of resistance, and we need to, be inspired to do that here in America because it's coming. So, yeah, great points by you guys. Hernandez, the hero, and Scoopy, thank you very much. Austin DeTulio throws in 5, no comment. Thank you so much, Austin. And Snaggleby says, oops, I didn't know that teal was required for my goal. My bad, doctor. No bad at all. Thank you very much for the $5. Let's see where we're at now. We have reached the goal. Okay. Well, before we hop off here, as I promised, we're going to be doing a long goal here. We have reached the goal. So let me get a drink of water. All right. You guys now, set the timer. Set the timer, Snagglebeast. And if anybody wants to participate with me, you can go ahead and try. I'm going to try to break a minute. I'm going to try to break 1 minute. Go! Woo. I'm not sure if we got to a minute. I told you I'm working my way up to it, but that should have been better than the 42 seconds last time. Did somebody time it? Did we get a timer in there? Tell me somebody timed it. 14 seconds. 14 seconds. 32 to 34 seconds. I need to work on my breath if we're going to reach a minute. My goal is to reach 1 minute. My goal to reach 1 minute, and I challenge Jim Bob to a goal contest to see who can do it longer. 33 seconds. I got to do longer than that. I got to break that. That's weak stuff. That is weak stuff. Man, if that was 34 seconds, I was legitimately out of breath. If I'm going to break a minute, I'm going to have to do like breathing practices and drills, breathing techniques so I can break it. 56 seconds. I don't know. I'm seeing 30 some. Snaggleby says 32 to 34. Oh man. I'm going to have to work on that. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for everybody who supported. You need Jim Bob's tribal goal music. I don't know what that means. He plays a certain music when he reaches the goal. Bullshit. Bullshit. That was not muted. We keep telling JB the same thing. Breathing exercise are necessary. Yeah, that's something. I'm gonna have to really work on the lungs on that one. The 1 minute goal. That is the goal. That is the new goal when we reach the goal. The new goal once we reach the goal is a minute long goal. That's the goal. So anyways, guys, thank you all so much for being here. And thank you everybody who supported today's stream. A major thank you to Tara for another fantastic topic. Backseat says it took the constant sound as big noise and slowly turned your volume down. Did it really? I didn't know that. Look up singing exercise as well, because you're not just breathing, you're also speaking. Yeah, true. Anyways, thank you all so much. God bless you all. And I'm excited to get some of the new content we got out that's coming. I'm really excited for some of the streams we got going on. So thank you all so much for the stream. Major thank you to Tara and the family. God bless your son. God bless your husband. And thank you for him introducing you to St. Stephen the Great. And I hope this was useful and educational for everybody out there. So I will catch you all in the next one. As always, until then, God bless.